Meg Records, the Meg Classified Database, Level 611, The Maze, The Creatures, The Monster, Survival Difficulty, Class Hunting Grounds, Hostile Centralized Oversight, Imminent Danger at all times, No Safe Locations, Security Status, Public, Security Protocols. All Wanderers are allowed free viewing of the current documentation regarding Level 611. However, known entrances in the midst of Wanderer activity hotspots, which are sparse in their own regards, but nonetheless notable, are guarded by Meg and BNTG guards to prevent dangerous and unwanted entrances. Security Justification. As any Wanderer has the chance to encounter one of Level 611's entrances, it is imperative that all Wanderers be informed of Level 611 so that they can avoid any potentially fatal encounters. Warnings to ward off Wanderers from entering Level 611 are propagated in Wanderer circles with the purpose of aiding this cause. Description. Level 611 is a recently discovered dense network of beraggled and filthy passageways and rooms that are reminiscent of various different architectural and aesthetical makes, examples of which include maintenance and sewer tunnels, asylums, and hospitals, amongst others. The designs of the hallways share no common or consistent identifiable era, and no two architectural decorations which adorn the hallways are identical. The only constant within Level 611 is the immense amount of unsanitary, excretory, and gory waste which is splattered on every surface of the level. Human entrails, feces, bile, and other such substances give the level a pungent and noxious smell, as well as a slippery, membrane-like coating, which makes traversing the level's innocuous-looking, but deceitful, terrain potentially harmful. Analysis of these substances has shown there to be no identifiable matches with any human being, alive or dead, which means that the most plausible conclusion is that these substances generated alongside the level during its initial conception. Returning to the description of the level's architectural mode, or rather, lack of it, one can easily describe the level's general make as being flimsy in design at its best, and atrociously pernicious at its worst. The level is stable for the most part, albeit some corridors contain various forms of hazardous structural instabilities, which make some sections untraversable in a safe and appropriate manner. These misgivings in the structural department are only a fraction of the level's shoddy design. However, long dead cables and thick iron chains hang from the level's ceilings freely, obstructing the main pathways. Water pipes occasionally jut out from the floors and the walls, frequently described as being fractured beyond repair. Footnote: said pipes have been recorded to spurt out what analysis has proven to be untreated sewage, though only 3 occurrences of this happening have been recorded thus far. End footnote. Image caption: a photo of one of the level's dead ends, taken in a passageway reminiscent of a sewer tunnel. Worst of all is the tiling of the level. Despite the various different building types that Level 611 is comprised of, the level's halls are always covered by a form of tiles, most commonly made of granite and ceramic. Very few of these tiles remain intact, as the majority of them are broken, shattered, or caved in. This makes the already deadly passageways even more treacherous to go through, as the tiles are one of the major sources of non-entity, see below, related injuries reported from the level, with tripping, cutting, and more serious wounds being the main offenders in cases where such injuries were documented. Apart from the meager qualities which were previously mentioned, the level also possesses an esoteric layout, which has baffled all those who have tried to study it. Whilst it conforms entirely to Euclidean geometry, the passageway's formation is startling. For one, their density is alarming, mainly due to the corridors being nestled closely to one another, leaving very little wall thickness between them due to their close proximity. The corridors themselves also frequently twist and turn in right angles, with there being no straight hallway recorded to extend more than 15 meters at a time. Lastly, as one has probably inferred by this point, the hallways have never been observed to curve or twist in any direction except for the aforementioned turns, and they also have never been seen to change elevation, leading Meg archivists to believe that the level is located entirely on a single horizontal plane. Lighting inside Level 611 is also a mystery. Candles, LED lights, fluorescent tubes, and many other light-generating appliances have been observed, all in varying states of disrepair. In some areas, light is intolerably bright, whilst in others, light is entirely absent, engulfing wanderers in darkness. This inconsistency is attributed to the presumed age of the lights, or damage they may have sustained through the years, but all theories remain unconfirmed for now. One last notable quirk regarding Level 611's layout is the infrequent presence of rooms. A seldom find, they can be found solely in junctions or splits in the corridors of Level 611, oftentimes being just a few inches larger than the corridors of the level itself. They are characterized by the common, but not guaranteed, presence of rotten wooden furniture in their central point, and the rare, inexplicable appearance of fresh fruits on said furniture. No explanation has been attributed to these phenomena for the time being, so the meaning behind the presence of both the rooms and the objects inside of them remains elusive. Entity 611-1/The Sentinel. The previously mentioned dangers which are present in the level pale in comparison to the greatest danger within the confines of Level 611. The entire warranty for the level's alternate classification, Entity 611-1, colloquially referred to outside the realm of professional documentation as the Sentinel, is currently the only known Backrooms native entity to roam the level. As one will have most probably understood by now, the threat that it poses to life alien to Level 611, footnote, no distinction is made by Entity 611-1. All living beings that enter the level, both human and not, are threatened by the entity's presence, end footnote, is of a degree far greater than that of the average hostile entity. As soon as wanderers enter Level 611, the entity begins tracking them, regardless of how far it is from their current location. Upon reaching them, the entity violently slaughters the wanderer using what has been described by witness accounts as a large metal blade fixed to chains. Observations, recordings, and recollections from various different wanderers have observed that the entity is capable of running at inhuman speeds at what is presumed to be its greatest potential, whilst also keeping itself from falling over despite Level 611's terrain, throwing objects of seemingly tremendous weight across great distances with relative ease and accuracy, surviving fire salt crystal explosions of considerable size while sustaining only minor injuries, hearing wanderers across what are postulated to be tremendous distances, and, presumably, locating them based solely on said sense, an unconfirmed increase in the ability of scent detection. Detailed descriptions of the entity's appearance are ever-changing and apocryphal, and, since it is hazardous to even attempt to document the entity via digital media, i.e. pictures, videos, etc., due to the previously mentioned abilities, these descriptions are the only means the Meg has of documenting the entity's appearance without risking the lives of personnel. This has, however, not discouraged blithe wanderers from taking pictures of the entity, which has obviously resulted in traumatic experiences and unwanted deaths. Whilst the recovered media is generally of considerably poor quality due to the situation in which it was taken, they have, coupled with the descriptions, given Meg archivists a clear enough description of the entity's physical appearance and manners. Image caption: a still photo captured by a wanderer who had an encounter with the entity. Context and legitimacy are unknown, but the photo is one of the clearest which the Meg has in its possession. Entity 611-1 is a large, presumably around 2.5 meters, 8 foot 2, tall, humanoid entity with sickly brown skin, which is covered in festering, pattern-like wounds. Entity 611-1's face, arms, and legs are all covered in metallic armor, so an accurate description of said areas cannot be given. Its body is extremely muscular, and is oftentimes seen partially covered by a thin, soiled garment. Entity 611-1 is often described as being heard vocalizing grunts and moans, in what seems to be a strained manner, which has led many to believe that its armor is causing it pain. The source of the armor is unknown, but it is theorized to have either been created by other unknown beings inside of Level 611, or to be a part of the creature itself. An archaic text from the Lost, who documented both Level 611 and Entity 611-1 long before the Meg's first encounter with them, lists a rule of thumb which they advised fellow members to follow should they find themselves in the level, which has been documented here both for reference and relevance. If you dare tread the demon's den, be aware that it knows its domain far better than you could ever hope to know. Be rigid and vigilant in your travel through the belly of the beast, but don't be alarmed when it decides to purge its lair. As it currently stands, research is still ongoing as to what exactly the entity's motives may be, how it detects wanderers from such, presumably, long distances, and where it originated from. Wanderers are generally advised to avoid entering level 611 in the first place, unless they have been explicitly ordered to do so. But, should they find themselves in it unwillingly, they are advised to look for an exit before the entity engages them. One can calculate how close the entity is to their location by listening for the clanging of its footsteps. The hallways of level 611 reflect sound extremely well, so the noises the entity makes reverberate across remarkable distances. Bases, communities, and outposts. Due to all that has been described above, it is glaringly obvious that it is impossible to set up any form of settlement inside level 611. Entrances and exits. Entrances. Throughout various indoor levels, particularly in those which are industrial-oriented and/or in a state of disrepair, e.g. Level 3, Electrical Station, Level 566, Factory, rusty, blood-splattered metal doors have a tendency to appear. Opening them or entering them without closing the door does not directly lead to level 611, and instead leads to a small closet-sized area. However, if one closes the door behind them, the door will disappear, and they will find themselves in level 611. Exits. Some unstable areas have a no-clippable aura to them, which makes it so that they can be identified by wanderers as no-clippable. The location of exit is random, but a predisposition to the previously mentioned levels has been noted. Oversight Council Draft. All information in this message is confidential and subject to change. Security classification. Pending. Starting from 08/03/2028 up until 27/03/2028, a series of explorations and neutralization attempts ended up revealing vital information regarding level 611 and its native entities. See attached files. All of you, as part of the Oversight Council, are to view the following files, which have been compiled and submitted by your fellow overseer Thomas Verne. Discussion on the draft's future security clearance and their implications will be discussed in next week's Oversight meeting. The reading of these documents is mandatory, and those of you who do not read through these files until that date arrives will be heavily reprimanded. Overseer C. Andrew. Log 1. Date 08/03/2028. Involved personnel. Explorer Inda Sitiawan, Data Collector. Chief Expeditions Supervisor Marco Cabrera, Supervising Agent. Equipment used: head-strapped camera with an attached microphone, 2 empty vials, a pair of disposable gloves. Purposes: the original aim of the expedition was the sampling of the material that coats the surfaces of level 611. However, the aforementioned aim was overshadowed by an unexpected development. Additional notes: disciplinary action in regards to Inda Sitiawan's carelessness has been shot down by an Oversight Council vote of 10-6 in her favor. This was largely due to the breakthrough discovery her misgivings have led to. Begin log. 0 minutes, 0 seconds. Log begins. Feed comes to life as Inda is holding the camera in front of her face. She is standing before an entrance to level 611 in one of level 11, the city that never sleeps, level 11's off-limits maintenance tunnels. Inda. Hello? Hello? Is this getting through? Marco. Reading you loud and clear, Inda. Shall we get this started? Inda. Right on. I'll try and, make this swift. 022. Inda opens the door, enters the small room, and closes the door behind her. The connection falters a bit as the transition between levels occurs, but it is re-established fairly quickly. Faint clanging can be heard a few seconds after her entrance. Inda, whispering, "Oh, God, I better make this quick. Those sounds, the footsteps are too close for comfort. Gods, the smell." 050. Inda makes her way through level 611's corridors in silence, frequently perking up when she hears the footsteps become more audible. 212. Inda finds a large concentration of organic excretory matter at a corridor's side. She bends down and pans the camera at it. Inda, still whispering, "Does this look good for the first sample, Marco?" Marco, "Seems like it. You don't have to whisper, by the way. If that thing had to hear you, it's already done so. Inda, I'd like to think my movements are, still concealed. Inda opens the vial and scoops some of the matter into the vial with her hand. She stops at some point to gag and retch, muttering curses under her breath. The footsteps gradually get louder and louder. Eventually, she finishes and begins walking once more. 4:23. Inda encounters a room, inside of which she finds a table with fresh fruit on it. Scanning the general area, she finds another large mass of organic matter in a shallow depression in one of the corners of the room. Inda, is this... Marco, yeah, be quick. That thing's getting close. Inda, sir, please try not to make me so uneasy. That remark's not helping. Marco, right. My apologies. Inda crouches near the heap and almost slips into the matter. She shudders and begins to collect another sample in a more agitated manner. She fumbles with the vial as the footsteps get louder and more rapid. She finishes and begins walking through the corridors once more. 6:45. Inda begins searching for an unstable section of the level, humming a shrill tune to herself as she goes on. The footsteps get louder and louder, rapidly approaching her proximity. She nervously tugs at her wrist camera, consequentially loosening it in the process. Inda approaches a fork in her path, where she suddenly stops and begins to speak excitedly. Inda, found it! There's an unstable point. I'm gonna begin no-clipping. Inda begins lightly ramming herself against the walls of a brick maintenance tunnel in an attempt at no-clipping out of the level, muttering prayers to herself as she does so. 7:53. Inda no-clips into what was later determined to be level 3.1, Space Complex, but accidentally drops the camera back in level 611 in the direction of the converging paths, ending communication via the equipment originally assigned to her. The footsteps lessen in velocity and are more erratic, almost frustrated in demeanor. In the meantime, Inda establishes a phone call with Marco to continue communication. Inda, hello? Marco, are you there? Marco, God damn it, Inda, you left the camera behind. Inda, I'm aware. That's why I called you. Marco, cameras aren't cheap, girl. We were lucky we found a good one like that one we gave you. Why do we even give you a camera for a simple collection mission? This is... This won't shine good on your file. Not at all. Inda, I'm so sorry, Marco. I can try and find one, or pay you a lot, some coin for it. Marco, we don't use BSC for stuff like cameras, Inda. Just get back to 11, the city that never sleeps. We'll rectify this there. Inda, roger that. Sorry. The call between the two is cut, as Inda begins to make her way back to level 11. Video feed inside level 611 continues at Marco Cabrera's request for 3 hours, in hopes of gathering clear media documentation of Entity 611-1, without much success. Suddenly, however, the footsteps of Entity 611-1 get nearer and nearer as it comes into view, rapidly dashing into the main corridor from one of the paths. The entity runs past the camera, grunting, as another instance of Entity 611-1 runs from the other pathway that leads into the camera's corridor 5 seconds later. Said instance continues running in the same direction as the first one, and they both run out of view of the camera, only leaving behind them the echoes of their footsteps. Marco. Oh, Dios mío. End log. Aftermath. The concerning footage was immediately archived, and oversight interest into Entity 611-1 was piqued greatly at the revelation that more than one instance of Entity 611-1 existed. As such, an order to begin experimentation regarding the inhabitants of level 611-1 began, spearheaded by Marco Cabrera, who was given a special clearance to oversee all efforts relating to Entity 611-1 in spite of his rank. This was done under the stipulation that all such work be conducted in conjunction with Underseer Thomas Verne, who helped with archiving and coordination. Access to special expedition-related supplies and personnel was allocated to the project, henceforth dubbed E611X. Log 2. Date 13/03/2028. Involved personnel: Class 4 BNTG Guard Salvu Falzon, takedown operative. Chief Expeditions Supervisor Marco Cabrera, supervising agent. Equipment used: head-strapped camera with an attached microphone, slingshot, pouch of fire salt crystals, standard issue BNTG stealth gear. Purposes: the aim of this expedition was the attempted dispatching of an instance of Entity 611-1 for examination purposes. The autopsy would allow Meg archivists to get a better grasp of the anatomy of Entity 611-1 instances, greatly helping the effort to document the species in the process. Footnote: the reason that this was not attempted earlier was due to the fact that it was believed that Entity 611-1 was unique, so preservation efforts of the species at the time was prioritized over research and understanding of its nature. End footnote. Additional notes: Salvu Falzon, who had served the BNTG for 4 years prior to this expedition, was hired for documentation purposes for a sum of 15.5 thousand BSC. Marco Cabrera also requested that a military-grade pistol be provided from the BNTG's vault for the purposes of the expedition. However, the request was declined due to the fact that the chances of valuable equipment loss were high in the mission, as they were, and, on the occasion that the bullet simply did nothing to hinder Entity 611-1's movement, they would have been wasted. Begin log. 00. Salvu's camera flickers to life with a sharp click. He is inside one of Level 611's rooms. Footsteps can be heard mere seconds after the camera turns on. Salvu: yeah, can already hear the poundin'. I'll try and set up my stand as quickly as I can. Marco: are you aware of what you've been assigned to do? Salvu: yep, this won't take long. I just gotta wait for that thing to get here. I'll just pray to Jesus and hope that only one of those things comes after me. Marco: understood. Please proceed when you feel comfortable doing so. 032. Salvu calmly begins walking down the halls of Level 611 at a brisk pace, searching for a suitable dead end to prepare themselves in. He does not make much noise as he does so, treading lightly, despite the fact that he had most probably already been detected by Entity 611-1. 252. The footage from Salvu's side cuts out, but the audio can still be heard. The feed occasionally flashes images of a bloodied woman, but then stabilizes to show a continuous feed of the woman, who occasionally looks either at the camera or at another area in the room. She tries to speak, but nothing gets through from her side, and she can't be heard, which seemingly distresses her upon her finding out. Light suddenly flashes on her face, and the shadow of a man envelops the area around her as her face turns deathly white with fear. A hand reaches out for her, but the aftermath of the video is unknown, as the feed cuts back to Salvu before it can be seen. Marco watches in silent fascination during the whole time in which this takes place. Marco: holy crap! Dude, what happened? Salvu: huh? What happened? Marco: the girl. You didn't see her? Salvu: you've lost your marbles, man. I'm alone here. Except for those things and this awful stench, I guess. Marco: No, I'm telling you, I swear, I saw this girl on the feed at some point. It's like your feed was intercepted. Salvu: yeah, not my department there. Just show me later if your cam's picked it up. I know I saw nothing, 'cause I don't got a camera feed to look through. Anyways, me thinks I found a good place now. What do you say? Salvu approaches a long hallway, which leads to a dead end. Salvu: well? Marco: yeah, that looks good. Is it no-clippable? Salvu: least of my concerns. I can probs take it out. Marco: I'd advise against doing so. Have a failsafe for if you do need it, dude. Salvu: again, I can do this. I'm competent enough to handle that thing. Anyways, do I continue setting up, or are you gonna get on my ass for everything I do? Marco: you shouldn't be... Actually, you know what? Fine, just do whatever, man. Salvu: cool. I'll begin preparing myself for this thing then. 448. Salvu takes out the slingshot and some fire salt, listening for the footsteps of Entity 611-1. He squats on the ground, gags a bit, and takes out a lighter and a cigarette. He lights the cigarette and takes a few puffs before the feed cuts out once more, and another video, presumably from the girl, comes to life. The video shows a pair of legs being dragged across what appears to be a grated iron bridge suspended over a bottomless abyss. Chains can be seen hanging from the ceiling, and cages can be seen strung to those chains on occasion. No sounds come from the footage, and the camera remains the way it does for the whole duration of the footage. Who or what ever is dragging the camera holder is never seen, as the feed cuts back to Salvu a while later, who has finished smoking and is now absent-mindedly playing with his slingshot. The footsteps of an Entity 611-1 instance can be heard very close by. Marco: I saw it again. I know. This time I know. Salvu: Not the time, man. It's coming. Might want to turn down your volume. Fire salt's pretty loud. Marco: Yeah, good luck. 6:03. As Salvu takes a deep breath, an Entity 611-1 instance cuts around the corner from whence Salvu came earlier and begins hurtling towards him at full speed. Salvu loads and fires the fire salt at it with astonishing dexterity and accuracy, which seems to damage the creature and halt its advent towards him. By the time Salvu has finished using all his crystals, however, the creature is still alive and begins another dash towards Salvu, although it is visibly stunted. Salvu: Shit! God, no. Please, I don't want to die. Fuck this, man. Salvu unsheathes a long army knife from his bag and steadies it. Seeing this, the entity pauses suddenly, grabbing onto the walls, and subsequently causing damage to them, to stop its momentum from acting on its body. Once it stops moving, it unwraps a chain with a massive blade at its end from itself, and begins spinning it around rapidly. It throws it at Salvu, who had stood frozen with fear up until this point. He sidesteps and dodges the blade with great swiftness, but twists his ankle in the process. The blade wedges itself in the wall, smashing a fair bit of tiles off of it. Salvu: No. Mux, heck. Salvu begins hyperventilating as he struggles to get up. The entity, which has pulled the blade back to itself in one swift motion, wraps it around itself once more, and begins running towards Salvu. As it nears him, it reels back a fist and hits his face with such force that it knocks the camera off of his head and sends him tumbling backwards. Noticeable bone cracking is picked up by the microphone. Salvu, muffled whimpering: Please. Entity 611-1 shambles to him and raises him up with his left hand. It is heard to breathe rapid, heavy, and raspy breaths, and a black substance can be seen leaking from its helmet. Moving a screaming Salvu to have his back on the wall, it begins pummeling his face with its other hand, a view captured all too well by the camera, which was strewn on the ground at the time. His face caves in with the second punch, and his weeping and wailing dies, but the entity is relentless with its beating, and does not stop the onslaught. It keeps repeatedly punching the same area, shattering his skull to bits as flesh and brain matter begin to fall off of his face in large, meaty dollops. After his innards have been removed from his head, the entity drops him on the floor with a pathetic thump, and runs off back from where it came from, unknowingly hitting the camera with its foot as it does so. The feed cuts one last time to a video of the girl from the previous feeds lying on her knees. She is crying before a bandaged figure which stands before her. 2 instances of Entity 611-1 standing by its side. The figure strokes her hair, running its fingers through it before violently tugging at it. The girl seems to be in great pain, as the video shows her to be screaming in sheer agony. When the figure stops tugging, the girl begins pointing accusatory fingers at the figure, to which the figure replies by making a simple gesture at her head. The girl seems to be taken aback, and before the feed cuts for good, the 2 entities can be seen reaching for her. Marco Cabrera, who had until now been watching the whole thing in stunned silence, vomits right there and then. End log. Aftermath. Cabrera requested a temporary week-long leave from all work revolving around Project E611X after the video feed was cut, which was granted to him in light of what he had witnessed. Whilst his body was never recovered despite another expedition which was sent to locate it, Salvu Falzon was given an honorary funeral in Level 11, the city that never sleeps, anyways, which was attended by his spouse, his 2 children, a handful of friends and co-workers, and all 3 overseers of the Meg. Following this, it was determined that the dispatching of an Entity 611-1 instance would require a heftier amount of firepower, the results of which can be seen in Log 3. Log 3. Date: 21/03/2028. Involved personnel: Meg Division Heavy Metal members, Takedown Operatives. Sarah Taylor, Team Lead. Stefano Aganello, Weapons Expert. Fyodor Alinsky, Archivist. Chief Expedition Supervisor Marco Cabrera, Supervising Agent. Equipment used: 3 head-strapped cameras with attached microphones, 3 pouches of emergency fire salt crystals, 3 sets of standard-issue BNTG stealth gear, one 9mm pistol, 3 bullets, to be used only for emergencies. Specially crafted superweapon, the Cauldron. Purposes. Following the events of Log 2, it was determined that more firepower and more preparation was to be used in order to successfully take out an instance of Entity 611-1. Once said firepower was obtained, another takedown squad of volunteers was assembled, and the attempted dispatching of an Entity 611-1 instance took place. Additional notes. Seeing as pure fire salt crystals were only partially effective in holding back Entity 611-1, the MEG commissioned local foundries and arms experts to aid in the creation of the superweapon dubbed the Cauldron for its cauldron-like shape. The weapon was comprised of a specially cast meter-long cannon-like structure with a piston at the inside's back end, which was wheeled on an adjustable cart. The ammunition it used was a separately stored, as the ammo was too dangerous to simply keep freely in the weapon itself, 3-kilogram fire salt ingot, which was to be propelled by releasing the charge of a white Object 42, lightning in a bottle from its storage unit, designed with the generous help of Frederick Rustpunk Kaiser. Note, see level 817, the scrapyard. The charge would propel forth a piston at an extremely high velocity, which would send the ingot flying at the entity with tremendous force. Before the mission itself, Team Heavy Metal tested the weapon a total of 3 times inside of specifically designated areas in level 817, the scrapyard. The total cost of the manufacturing of all the parts necessary for the weapon was a gross sum of around 62,000 BSC. Begin log. 00. The camera turns on inside level 566. Factory. Pointing at the cauldron. It is in Sarah's hand, who had not put it on her head at the time. All 3 of the selected members of Team Heavy Metal stand beside the cauldron, with an additional 2 of their fellow members by their side to help with the introduction of the cauldron to level 611. Sarah. Hello, Marco. Do you read me loud and clear? Marco. Yep. Everything good on your side? Sarah. Yeah, the team's preparing to hoist the cauldron in. I'm not the brawn of the group, quite the opposite really, so I'm here setting up communication with you instead. Marco. Sounds good. How are you feeling? Sarah. Pretty good, all things considered. I get a bit nervous, I suppose. There's actually a reason I kinda skirted away from the group. Could I talk to you a bit, like, now, one-on-one? Marco. Sure, I suppose. What's up? Sarah. I'm aware this mission might end badly. If shit hits the fan, Sarah makes a splat sound for emphasis. I'm aware of what I've chosen to do. She pauses for a moment, as if to formulate a thought. Sarah, I don't want to scare the others. I've told them we're gonna kill it for sure. The mission, you know. So, I digress. Just, please, if something happens to me, tell Gene, my husband, tell him I love him lots. Will you do that for me, Marco? Marco. Yes. I'll make sure of that. Don't start thinking like that, though. You know, it's not good to go into this with that mindset. Sarah. Yeah, I know. I've come here now. No turning back. It's time I finish this. I'll call the team and give them the green light to get that thing in. Thanks for being a pal, Marco. I appreciate it. Marco. You too, Sarah. 156. Sarah sighs and straps the camera to her head. Looking over in the team's general direction, she claps her hands, and the small amount of murmurs that had been circulating amongst them are silenced. Sarah. All right, you lot, let's get in there. In and out. But first, let's actually get something else in there. Gary, Fyodor, you guys grab the front and hoist it up. Fyodor. Aye, aye, Cap. Sarah. Mitsuki, help Steph roll that thing in. It's hefty, so be careful. Sarah helps Gary and Fyodor hoist the cauldron into the compartment. Mitsuki, Jesus, just you 3 are supposed to move this on your own? Stefano, it's what we do. Fyodor, yep. Alrighty, things ready for transport. Sarah's camera turns to the weapon, which is now partially upright inside of the compartment in such a way that both it and the team members can fit inside. Sarah, right then, you 2. Steph, Fyo, turn on your cameras. Fyodor and Stefano turn on their cameras and pan them both to Sarah. Sarah, everything shipshape? Yeah? Then what are we waiting for? Let's get on with this. The 3 teammates barely managed to enter the compartment, but they managed to squeeze in after a minute struggle. Gary, stay safe, guys. Or, well, as safe as you can get, I suppose. Stefano, we'll try. Heh. Sarah, we will. A bad attitude is detrimental to our attempts. Come on now, team. Let's do this. Fyodor, Sarah, and Stefano all cheer, and then wait in the compartment, staring at each other occasionally. Stefano, might wanna, Mitsuki. Oh, right, Gary. No worries, Mitt, I've got this. 3:45. Gary carefully closes the door, and Fyodor's camera catches him waving to them before they enter level 611. The camera feed distorts a bit upon entrance, but is otherwise stable after a while. As the confines of the compartment vanish, the cauldron begins to slip a bit, which the team rectifies by helping it stay upright. When the movement ceases on their side, the team begins to hear footsteps echoing from far away. Sarah, sheesh! 10 seconds in and we've already almost broke the cannon. Fyodor, well, it's not broken, so it's not our biggest worry right now. Let's make this quick. Stefano, yeah, this place is giving me major heebie-jeebies. Sarah, right. Let's go. Come on, team. The team bring down the cauldron and carefully begin to maneuver it through the hallways. They pass through a long sewer tunnel, before passing into a section where the hallways narrow slightly and begin to resemble the walls of a factory. Fyodor, ugh, is that shit on the walls? No wonder this place smells like ass. Stefano, yeah, the file said it's made of crap and entrails. Not exactly the happiest combo, but what can we do? Sarah, yeah, it's quite a shitty situation. The group giggles nervously before continuing their movement in silence. 5:02. Sarah, hey, how come that thing hasn't come to us yet? The recordings they showed us, the ones that I got through entirely at least, had people getting approached by the beasts at around this time. I kinda wanna blow up things. Fyodor, don't jinx it. Stefano, yeah, Sarah, we'll just be seeing it come around the corner in a few more seconds. Like, bam! Exactly as you say that. Sarah, no, have you guys noticed the footsteps seem to be getting more distant? Stefano, ah? Fyodor, it may be the labyrinthian nature of this place. Maybe it has to take a detour to get to us? Sarah, yeah, I'll comfort myself with that. Or try to, at least. The feed on all 3 cameras suddenly cuts to the same video of a bloodied room, the video coming from what is presumed to be a video device on a bed. Audio can be heard this time, so connections with the team are cut out entirely. A blonde girl, presumably the one from the previous feeds, lies weeping on the bed. She looks thinner than last time, and her equally bloody and unhealthy-looking hair hangs in patches from her head. A set of heavy footsteps can be heard from outside, and, like an afterthought, a set of lighter footsteps can be heard alongside them as well. Heavy clanging can be heard coming from what is presumed to be a large metal door, and a creak is heard as it opens. The girl looks up with fear in her eyes as the heavier footsteps approach her. A hoarse voice can be heard speaking in what was identified to be Esperanto, but only small snippets such as time, tempo, and klinu, Purigu Vin, could be identified, leading analysts of this log, and further on, the events of Log 4, to conclude that the speaker was talking about a ritual of sorts at the time. The girl panics and tries to scramble out of the room, but as she leaves the view of the camera, the heavy footsteps are heard clanging with newfound intensity and speed, and the girl is heard to be choking as soon as they stop. The footsteps grow more distant, the door clangs, and the camera is left in the room with nobody attending to it. The feed cuts shortly after, and the camera footage returns back to normal. The crew is in a dead end, similar to that in which Salvu had been in prior to their exploration. Marco, what the? Jesus, what was that? Sarah, what was... Oh, wait, you got one of those, Marco. Yeah, she was in the room, and I think one of the entities got her. There was this guy speaking to her in, like, a familiar language. Do you guys know any linguists in the Backrooms? Stefano, that's an issue for later. We're preparing for our monster now. We've studied the cannon in this hallway. We're ready to blow that thing to smithereens as soon as it comes here. Marco, I don't know. Something's bothering me about it. If that thing was with someone, it means there's more stuff to worry about here than just, those things. Sarah, again, problem for later. We'll solve that when we've got the mind for it. Marco, alright. Say, you guys are in a no-clippable hallway, right? Fyodor, nope. We're banking on this thing turning that monster to sawdust. Marco, that's pretty... Fyodor, reckless? Perhaps. But I don't think that thing will be surviving anyways. Stefano, If it doesn't happen, then I'll just not think of that for now. Not much we can do if that happens. 7:38. After a period of relative silence, footsteps can be heard at a distance that seemed to be closer than the last position they were heard in. The team members look towards each other and instantly begin preparing the cauldron. Sarah: Okay, Fio, grab the front end. Steph, come help me with the trigger near the end. Should need a good 2 pulls to get it firing. Stefano: Yes, ma'am. Sarah: Fyodor, crank up the lever near the bottom. Set it to hit that thing in the chest, and load the ingot in. Maybe we'll blow its heart out. Fyodor: Right. Steadying it now. 8:12. The crew continues to prepare the cannon as the footsteps get closer. Stefano and Sarah are both prepared with the trigger, and Fyodor is holding the cannon with one hand and the pistol with another. Suddenly, footsteps can be heard turning around the corner, and an instance of Entity 611-1 begins bolting down the corridor. Sarah: Fire! The lightning is released, propelling the ingot out of the cannon at an extremely high velocity. Before the entity can realize its mistake, the ingot hits it in the abdomen and creates an enormous explosion. Tiles fall off of the explosion's proximity, and dust is propelled in the general area. The cannon is knocked over by the shockwave, and all 3 crew members either crouch or fall down due to its force. As the smoke clears, the corpse of the deceased entity comes into view, only partially damaged, but still seemingly unconscious and bleeding. Fyodor: God, my aim was off, but I think I've got it. Is it really dead, though? Stefano: Only one way to find out. Marco: Steph, what the fuck? No! Much to the dismay of his members, Stefano jumps onto the corpse and checks its pulse. He giddily looks back at his mates and gives them an ear-to-ear grin. Stefano: Unless this thing's coming back from the dead, we've done it. The Sentinel is no more. Marco: Hell yeah! Good job, guys. Sarah: Hey, one of them is dead. There's probably more around, so we best get going. Send a signal to base. They'll come for this later. We're gonna find a way out now. Marco, has the signal been received? Marco: Yep. Sarah: Right then, let's get going. Fyodor: Aye, aye. The crew begins to make their way out of the dead end they were inside of, when suddenly a loud bellowing noise can be heard in their proximity. They all look in fear as, from the opposite side of the corridor, another instance of Entity 611-1 emerges. Marco: Holy shit! Fyodor: Fuck! God, no! Not this bullshit again! Sarah and Stefano run back into the dead end as Fyodor takes out his gun, shooting all 3 bullets at the entity. One misses, but 2 of them hit it in the shoulder and its sides. The entity staggers a bit, but otherwise continues its speedy dash towards Fyodor. His camera picks up a shadowy figure approaching them leisurely from behind the entity before he turns to run. However, the entity catches up to him before he turns the corner and rams him into the wall in front of them. Fyodor's camera breaks instantly, but his crewmates capture the gruesome view and the cracking of bones with their devices. The entity detaches itself from the wall and recuperates itself before turning towards the remaining members of the team. Light footsteps can be faintly heard in the distance. Stefano: So, this is how it ends. You... Stefano sobs. It was an honor to serve with you, Sarah. Sarah: I am sorry for bringing you here. The entity unsheathes a blade, which looks entirely different from the one the instance in Log 2 had. It is unconnected by chains, so the entity simply throws it like a javelin. The blade flies across the corridor and hits Stefano directly in the chest, impaling him and pinning him to the wall. He vomits blood out before looking towards Sarah, and smiles one last time before his eyes lose their lively gleam, and he passes away. Sarah is shaking and bawling by this point, and the entity takes advantage of her situation to begin running down the corridor. Sarah runs towards it in hopes of passing by it, which she manages to do because the entity does not seem interested in her. Instead, it retrieves the blade from Stefano's corpse, and only then does it begin running with Sarah as its target. Sarah: No, I don't want to die! Sarah sobs. Please, not here! Marco: Sarah! The entity reaches Sarah and grabs her by the back. It turns her around to face it, giving the Meg the closest recorded image of the entity thus far. Looking straight at the camera, the entity coughs, and then begins speaking. Entity 611-1. Tainted. Impure. Sarah stares in shock at the creature, and is entirely still. Suddenly, a bandaged figure, similar to the one seen in Log 2's feed, pops up in the corner view of her camera and looks at her curiously. It then looks at the entity and raises its hand dismissively. Figure, take her away. She is fit for cutting. Footnote. The speech, and all subsequent speech made by this figure, was spoken in Esperanto. All of its speech hereafter is translated from the original language it was spoken in. End footnote. Sarah struggles and kicks, but the entity simply smacks her across the forehead with its knuckles, knocking her out, and subsequently breaking the camera. The last active feed is Stefano's camera, which showcases the figure running with a limp Sarah on its shoulders to an unknown location down the hallway it came from. The figure, which had stood silent and unmoving as this happened, walks up to Stefano's corpse and examines it. Noticing the camera, the figure detaches it from the corpse and picks it up with one hand. Figure, curious, very, very curious. The entity applies pressure to the camera and destroys it entirely. The feed is cut, and the expedition is considered finished. End log. Aftermath. All archivists who had viewed the footage were shocked, and a flurry of action was immediately called upon to discuss what had occurred. Marco Cabrera was admitted to an infirmary, where he fainted due to vasovagal syncope, which had overcome him following the broadcasting of the video. An emergency meeting was called, and discussion between senior archivists took place. 3 hours after the termination of Log 3, video communications were re-established with Sarah's camera, but audio was unavailable as the microphone had been destroyed. The events of this occurrence can be found in Log 4. Log 4, date 21/03/2028. Involved personnel: Sarah Taylor, non-applicable. Underseer Thomas Verne, supervising agent. Equipment used: head-strapped camera with attached microphone, damaged. Pouch of emergency fire salt crystals. Set of standard-issue BNTG stealth gear. Purposes: as the log was extempore, it lacked any defined quote-unquote purpose. Additional notes: as Marco Cabrera was indisposed at the time in which this log occurred, Thomas Verne, who was near the communication equipment at the time the log was broadcast, was the supervising agent for the duration of the footage. Commentary from T. Verne is still included in the log despite its lack of relevance to the events that unfolded. Begin log. 00. The camera feed turns on suddenly mid-speech, part of its lens fractured, and the footage glitching slightly every once in a while due to the damage it had sustained. The camera is still attached to Sarah's head during the start of the footage, and she can be seen speaking to a weeping woman whose condition appears to be in a state far worse than Sarah's. Sarah, don't worry. We'll try to find a way out of this. I remember this one quote from the time I used to be a total bookworm. Albert Camus said it. Where there is no hope, it is incumbent on us to invent it. Keep it in mind for as long as we're here. We can do this. We can surmount this ordeal. Thomas. What the hell? Sarah, can you hear me? Sarah. Even if worst comes, we die, and we'll get closure. At least this will end for you. God knows how long you've been here, poor thing. Thomas. I guess not. X. Footnote. The woman has requested that her identity remain anonymous. See interview 611/Omega. So, for the purposes of documentation, she will be referred to simply as X going forward. End footnote. Crying. How can you be sure? What makes you think we'll get relief from this hell? That we won't just go a step closer to the devil himself? Sarah. It won't. No, even I'm not sure of that. I'm going off a wish and a prayer here, but I believe there is closure for us. Trust me. The woman nods, seemingly in agreement. She sits down with her back on a wall and stares gloomily around the room. Sarah looks around as well, revealing that the room, which is considerably large, houses 7 other humans. 2 are sleeping on the ground, another 2 are standing up, exchanging murmurs between themselves, and 3 of them are near what seems to be a large, locked metallic door, as if awaiting someone or something to arrive. Sarah sits on the ground as well, and, after exhaling a heavy, labored breath, she turns her head towards the woman. Sarah, do you know anything about those monsters running around? X. The jailers? Sarah, the big things with the helms on their heads. We call them sentinels. Is jailers what you call them? X. Yes, them. I don't really know much about them, even though I've been here for so long now. They're monsters, all right. What kind? I don't know. They don't speak much. Sometimes I doubt if I'm just imagining it when they do. But there are, Well, you've guessed it by now. They're our jailers. They bring us slop twice a day, they escort us to the preparation rooms when we need be, and they serve the enveloped one. Sarah, preparation rooms? Enveloped one? What are those? Wait, I think I know who, or what, the enveloped one is. Is it the bandage-wearing creep? X, nodding, but with an urgent expression on her face. Don't talk about them in that way. They do not speak our tongue, but those things do, and they bring him messages of any of our hopes for rebellion. Sarah, I'll keep that in mind. But pray tell, what are preparation rooms? X, yes, my apologies. I have neglected to tell you. My memory is fickle for reasons I shall explain later on. We're here for a reason, you know. You've probably figured it out by now. But we're sacrifices, Sarah. For who or what, I don't know. But preparation rooms are there for us to be, as you have inferred by now, prepared. Sarah, prepared for what? X, in due time, I will explain. Sarah, right. Do you, reckon we have a chance to escape this place? X, I doubt it. They've heard us. They've tortured us beyond anything I'd ever heard of before. We've been harmed in ways which I would never have deemed possible. I've been knocked out cold and had my blood removed, and then had it put in vials and force-fed to me on multiple occasions. Sarah, what? But I don't understand. You said you've been here for months, possibly years. What ritual could even require this level of torture? X leans in and lowers her voice to a barely audible degree. X, there's a wild card among us. The tongue they speak, Esperanto, a language created to unify the world. Yet it is used here to harm its inhabitants. The enveloped one thinks that they have edge over us because they can speak the language. They think they are able to conceal everything they say. But Manuel there, the geezer in the corner, he has knowledge of the language as well, and he tells us that the reason they do this to us is so they can break us. Sarah, to break you? X, the enveloped one's mind thinks that when man has seen the evils of the world, he becomes nothing but a husk. What better to fill with poison than a cup capable of bearing the milk of human kindness? Sarah, I'm not quite sure I follow. X, your earlier question, Sarah. What are we being prepared for? We are going to be used as vessels. We are being broken inside over and over again, until what is innate to our humanity is broken into tiny, tiny fragments, so that we lose the fight that is in our souls to prepare for the darkness that our body is to hold within it in due time. As such, the answer to your question comes now, and I have seen it with my own eyes before. We are being prepared to be molded into the jailers. X pauses, giggling sardonically. X, this is why I have lost hope. I have seen what they can do, and, quite frankly, I think it's better to just let fate take its course than it is to resist it. I fear what other punishments may await my misbehavior, so I have chosen to rest instead, and accept the situation. Sarah breathes in, as if to prepare a rousing speech, but she falters as she utters the first few syllables. X chuckles lightly, and tears fall down her cheek. Sarah, I guess you have reason to believe what you do. Do you reckon it's best we just give up? X, truthfully, and I'm saying this as honestly as I can, I have long awaited death. I yearn for the release I would get from not having to endure this any more than I already have. Sarah pauses for a moment, looks to the ground, and looks back at X. Sarah, how long have you felt like this? X, pardon? Sarah, if what you say is true, and you have been here for ages, what has kept you going? Why have you not opted to end it by, say, starving yourself from that slop stuff you mentioned earlier, which I'm assuming to be food? X stares at Sarah as if the question she had asked was obvious, but then pauses and narrows her eyes. X, I know why. She wipes a tear from her eyes and looks wistfully at the ground. X, I had her. Sarah, who? X, we weren't always this small of a number here in these chambers. They are large for a reason, you know. When I first came here, she was already here, and she spoke to me when I first woke up in this dreadful room. We conversed, and she told me stories of deities. Note, see the gods of Griot's hub, and talking parrots. Note, see entity number 7, Jerry, and dark nights. Note, see the group of interest, the Black Knights. Wonderful things I had never heard of before. She mentioned something called a Meg, and said that they worked to bring order to the Backrooms, whatever that meant. T. Vern, a former Meg agent, maybe? Sarah, you don't know what the Backrooms or the Meg are? X, I had not the slightest idea back then, but she put the idea to me in such a way that I yearn for things I have never experienced before, a longing for something I've never had the pleasure of experiencing for myself. But she told these stories to me, and I would sit there, entranced by her use of words, her eloquent descriptions of everything she had experienced prior to being trapped here, the grandiose way she described epics of glory. The scariest part for me was that I felt I knew of what she was talking about, somewhere in the back of my mind. Somewhere. I think I too once knew of those things in the detail she did, but, alas, the thought eludes me now. I have spent so long here that my thoughts have been muddled to oblivion, nothing but a broken artifact. Perhaps I will return to that life, should I ever get out of here. Perhaps I will find it was never real, but I would rather not entice myself with hypotheticals. Perhaps my fate has already been sealed, simply because I am here. X sheds a tear, but does not wipe it this time, letting it fall to the ground with a quiet plop. Sarah, I don't know what to say. X, you have not to say anything to me, love. I just wish to share this experience of mine with someone who would listen. Sarah, yes, I understand. I apologize for this sudden question, but what happened to, her? X, taken away months ago. I know not where she is now. Perhaps she is dead, and to that knowledge I rejoice. Perhaps she is in a worse state than she was in, and she is suffering more than she was here with me. All I know is that I long to sit by her and listen to her simply speak to me once more. I know there can be better days. X looks at the ground. Sarah does so too, rhythmically tapping a soundless tune on her kneecap. Sarah, perhaps I can fill that void? T. Vern, huh? X, I beg your pardon? Sarah, that yearning of yours. I have had my fair share of experiences I could write entire sagas about. Perhaps you would like to hear what I have to say of my own tales. X smiles blissfully, although the expression looks somewhat ingenuine. X, that would be lovely. Excuse my lack of enthusiasm. I have simply gotten used to this monotone life of mine, to such an extent that I sometimes forgot good things are still abundant elsewhere in this world. Sarah nods, returning the smile to her. Sarah, maybe we can make the best of this place, despite our situation, yes? X, perhaps so. I look forward to our discussions. Sarah, they can begin right now, if you wish. I have all the time in the world now that I'm Footsteps can be heard faintly in the background, and the door begins to open leisurely. Chains can be heard as the door creaks and groans, and all of the people who are on the ground get up from their positions in eager anticipation of the door opener's arrival. X, brother, that was bad timing. Sarah, perhaps it will have to wait for another time. Forgive me for not asking earlier, but I don't believe I've exchanged much formalities with you since I've arrived. Would you mind telling me your name? X, oh, my name is X. Sarah, nodding. You have a lovely name, X. It's a pleasure to meet you. The girls hold hands, bracing themselves for what is to come. As they get up, the door opens completely, and an instance of Entity 611-1 stands in the doorway, stomping its foot twice and groaning. It beckons for the group to follow it, which they all do. X, all of us? Already? But you've hardly been here for... The entity snorts a bit, causing X to flinch. She stops talking and begins to look down as she trudges behind the entity. 9:36. Traveling through a series of winding corridors, the prisoners follow the entity in complete silence. Eventually, they get to a large, metallic door with delicate designs and engravings on it. The entity grabs its seemingly heavy brass handles and raps them on the door with tremendous force. The door opens slowly. T. Vern. Jesus, what the hell is going on? Sarah, what the fuck? The rest of the captives look at Sarah with fear in their eyes. The entity 611-1 instance turns its head towards her direction, as if questioning her vocalization. Sarah gulps as the entity looks forward once more, and she silently begins to follow the entity anew. The posse of captives begin to enter the room, which is long and rectangular in shape. The walls have different drawings and murals on them, all depicting heinous and grotesque scenes of Entity 611-1 eviscerating its victims. The other captives seem unfazed by them, but Sarah seems to be clearly disturbed, as evidenced by her rapidly increasing breathing rate. X gives her a knowing glance and squeezes her hand in hers. After some more walking, the corridor opens up to a wider, but still rectangular, room, which has featureless and relatively clean walls compared to the rest of level 611. Ropes with shackles on their ends line the walls, and a wide, dark sinkhole opens up into the abyss near the far end of the room. The enveloped one can be seen staring at the group, standing in front of the hole with no detectable movement. An Entity 611-1 instance stands by its side, unmoving, until the enveloped one signals for it to join its companion with the clap of a hand. Both instances begin shackling the prisoners to the walls from their hands and their legs, when one of the male prisoners begins to cry. One of the instances smacks him across the chest, making him kneel over in pain. He stops crying despite the pain, and gets up, limping to the shackles as everyone watches in anxious fear. Despite the obvious will to sprint away from the scene, none of the prisoners resist the capture, and they let themselves be shackled to the walls without putting up much of a fight. Once they have all been shackled, the enveloped one stomps one of its feet on the ground, and the Entity 611-1 instances exit the corridor. They return a few minutes later with the blonde girl from Log 2 and 3's camera interruptions held in between them, who, unlike the rest of the prisoners, is struggling against their sheer strength. The entities do not harm her deliberately, and instead wait for her to tire out. When she does so, they throw her to the ground and walk up to the enveloped one to stand beside them. X visibly winces when she sees the girl, and looks pained when she is thrown to the ground. The enveloped one takes a few steps forward, raises its hands, and begins speaking. The enveloped one, called forth before the Harbinger, captives surround their equal to watch them become part of something bigger. Encased in the verses of the keepers of lands forgotten to time, etched with sacred blades, drawn on in deep shades of crimson red, as if to call out to the paragons, to say, "Take me, greater ones of the arcane plane, take me and use me as you please, show the world my full potential. In the name of the spirits and their masters, I bestow upon you today an honor, and to our spectators a glimpse of what is to come." The enveloped one makes a retching sound, and the two Entity 611-1 instances grab the blonde girl, who had, up until now, simply stared at the enveloped one with a furious scowl, from her legs and arms, standing by her side as they lay her horizontally on the ground, pinning her. She does not struggle, and, instead, begins to weep. Sarah's camera catches shots of peculiar, intricate markings on her skin, which were later identified as scars. The enveloped one approaches the girl, takes out an ivory knife, and plunges it into her navel. She does not scream in pain, but cries more intensely instead. X cries with her, which earns her some suspicious glances from the Entity 611-1 instances. During the speech, Sarah finds that the shackles were wrapped loosely around the gauntlet of her gear, as opposed to her hand, as was most probably intended. She attempts to remove her hand from the gear in hopes of loosening herself. The enveloped one, drive into flesh knives of piety, tear flesh from sinew, sinew from bone, and bone from bone, until but dust is left. And from dust the spirit shall form a new creature, one that is correct in everything it stands for. My lords, let me, your subject, be the messenger between planes, using this body to communicate to you my will, my wish for you to come to me once more, to change this sinner to a being worthy of walking the earth. Let me repent for the sin of my being by aiding you in bringing it to conflagellation and brimstone. The knife is driven up the girl's chest, to her neck, as her wailing becomes muffled and muted, as if she was restricted from being able to speak. a strange sound begins to be emitted from the Entity 611-1 instances, as if they were choking on something. Sarah manages to remove her right hand from the shackle, and excitedly begins to work on her left hand as well, the enveloped one. And now, I call on to you, come down to the earth, and enter my wrongful kin. Expurgate them, show them perfection, show them why you have been dubbed by all beneath you as the Paragons, and why I and many others have dedicated our time to welcoming your hold over the worlds. Envelop them in your embrace. Give their soul a reason to wander these plains. Rebirth them anew into something greater. Nothing else needs to be said anymore. Let there be perfection now. 1802. As soon as the enveloped one ends their speech, they step back and whistle a shrill passage. The entities suddenly vomit a black liquid, which corrodes their helmets and falls onto the girl's open entrails. Hissing can be heard coming from the girl as she cries out in pain, contorting and wailing in agony. X weeps as well, unable to bear the scene in front of her. The enveloped one returns back to its previous position, and the entities let go of the girl to stand next to them once more. However, they are now crouching and breathing heavily, as if recovering from a taxing ordeal. Sarah finally removes both hands from the shackles and cautiously reaches for the emergency fire salt which she had on her person from Log 3's expedition. She grabs a handful of them and throws the crystals at the unsuspecting entities. Both are taken by surprise, and they fall back into the abyss due to their vulnerable position. The enveloped one is not captured falling into the hole. Rather, they disappear into thin air and leave behind them nothing but brown vapors. The girl who had been cut stops moving at this point and is now entirely still, albeit a few shades browner than she was before. Sarah, "Oh God, are you guys okay?" A few affirmative grunts can be heard as Sarah grabs a jagged piece of debris from the explosion. She hastily begins cutting the prisoner's ropes. Sarah, "X, get that girl. Tell her we're gonna go. Now!" X, "I'm afraid she's beyond saving, Sarah." Sarah, "No, hell no. I'm not taking that as an answer. Get her up. Come on." X shakes her head sadly. X, "I wish it was that simple, dear. But she is gone now. Hurry up before you get to see what happens to the beast's subjects." T. Vern, "Hold on. What?" Sarah, "No, this isn't..." X, "Sarah, trust me. Please." Sarah, Fine." Once everyone has been liberated, Sarah begins making her way out of the room and into the mural corridor, taking one last glance at the girl as she leaves. The rest of the prisoners are still meek and idle. Sarah, "Come on, guys, we've got a chance to get out. Quick, take the opportunity." 21:14. The group begins sprinting down the hallway, but a few of the less agile members begin to fall back. As they reach the exit of the corridor and travel through a few other hallways, they realize that 2 members of their group have been lost. Amongst them, the Esperanto speaker, who had translated the enveloped one's intentions to the rest of the group. Female voice, "Shit! We lost Manuel and Dorian! God, no, it's all going to shit!" Sarah, "Never mind that. Keep going. Let's try and save our skin." Female voice, I can't do this. I'm not coming. Not at all." Sarah, No, suit yourself. I don't have time to try and convince you. Come on, guys, let's go." The group leaves the girl behind, leaving them with just 6 members. Sprinting sounds can be heard in the background, and a male scream can be heard far off in the distance. A few seconds later, a high-pitched screech can be heard coming from the same general direction as the original scream. Sarah, "What the hell was..." X, "Ignore it. Whatever it is. It isn't our problem now." 21:58. Weeping can be heard from the group as they arrive to a wooden door. They enter a room inside of which several pieces of paper are strewn about or plastered to the walls. Sarah begins grabbing handfuls of them at a time, taking whatever she can get her hands on and handing them to X. She tears a bit accidentally every now and then. X, "What are you doing? We need to get out of here." Male voice, "Yeah, I don't want to die. Let's get the fuck out of here." Sarah, "Just hold these. We're going soon. I'll explain why I'm doing this later." Female voice, "Oh no, I'm gone. I'm not dealing with this." 22:49. As the speaker of those words leaves the room, Sarah takes a few more papers, hands them to X and some of the other members of the group, puts some in her pockets, and bolts out of the room herself. Continuing to run by other rooms, they enter each one of them in hopes of finding an exit, but they are disappointed by empty surgical rooms each time. Some rooms contain papers, like the room that was encountered earlier, which Sarah occasionally stops to collect more papers from. But as the footsteps get closer, she begins doing this less and less. She stops doing it entirely when they get too close for comfort. The group eventually reaches a noticeably wider and longer hallway, and, on one faraway end, a doorway with a bright, white light coming out of it can be seen. Male voice. Is that it? An exit? X. Let's just go! Come on! Go! Go! Making good progress, the group gets closer and closer to the doorway, when, from a side hallway in front of them, an instance of Entity 611-1 emerges. Already swinging its massive chain knife, it hurls it towards them, and hits one of the people in the group, impaling them straight through the chest. Shock hits as their faces contort into a deathly, terrified expression, and they vomit out a heap of blood before being pulled towards the entity, which promptly grabs them by the head the moment it grabs their body, and twists it right off. All of the remaining members of the group, except for Sarah, scream, and they begin to frantically flail about. One runs in the opposite direction, and the remaining one hides behind Sarah, who takes out her fire salt patch and prepares herself to run at the entity. The moment the entity begins running towards her, she bolts, throwing the remaining fire salt at it as it gets close to her, which coincidentally slides directly into a hole in its helmet, blowing its head to smithereens and causing it to slump down in a crumpled heap. The shockwave knocks her down, causing her to land on her ankle, which she twists, an injury signified by a loud cry of pain. She immediately gets up, but struggles to stay upright without resting on the wall, and can no longer walk properly due to the injury. T. Vern. Holy shit! Is she okay? Sarah. X, help me out a bit here, please. I think I twisted my ankle. X. Sure, coming. 2537. X jogs to Sarah and grabs her from one side, hoisting her up to help her walk properly. The other group member grabs her from the other side, and they begin walking towards the door at a slower pace. Suddenly, however, they hear a scream coming from behind them, and a few seconds later, another instance of Entity 611-1 begins to sprint towards them from the other end of the hallway. The other group member abandons Sarah and X and runs towards the doorway. Sarah. Motherfucker! Come back here, you coward! X. Come back here, Alex! The other member frantically runs away without looking back, entering the door and leaving the duo behind to face the entity on their own. The two hug each other as it approaches, knowing full well they would not be able to outrun it, when suddenly, another instance of Entity 611-1 bursts out of another hallway, tackling the other instance. This instance is noticeably lacking both armor and clothing, and has a distinct set of arching scars on its back. X appears to be taken aback upon the sight of the new entity, and is even more surprised when it begins to beat up the other instance. Sarah takes the opportunity caused by this diversion and tugs at X's garments, as if to remind her that they were fleeing. Giving one last look at the instances brawling it out, the girls move towards the door, limping slightly due to Sarah's injury, until they pass through it. The video and audio stutter a bit due to the shift in levels, and the pair finds themselves in a snowy expanse, later confirmed to be level 420, the frozen lake. 2735. X. Oh, we got out! Sarah, we got out! T. Vern. Yes, that's our girl! Sarah. Yeah, we... Sarah groans and promptly collapses to the ground in exhaustion. X kneels down next to her, surprised and scared by the situation. X. Sarah? Sarah, wake up! Sarah. I'm up. I've got this thing in my back pocket. Take it out. X takes out a small, circular metallic object with a button on it. T. Vern. A beacon? X. What do I do now? Sarah. Press that thing, the button. Press it firmly. The beacon. It should send a distress signal. I'm gonna... T. Vern. Oh dear. Sarah collapses, passing out and driving the camera into the snow and obscuring video vision completely. Before the camera shuts down completely, X can be heard sending a distress signal from the beacon. X. Sarah? T. Vern. Signals received. We're coming, Sarah. Stay strong. X sits down on the snow and begins breathing heavily for the duration of the footage. The camera shuts down after a while, as it runs out of the charge required to continue functioning. End log. Aftermath. Following the sending of the distress signals, BPC members stationed in level 420 found the pair shivering in the snow hours later, huddled together for warmth. Sarah and X were both taken back to level 11, the city that never sleeps, where they received immediate intensive medical care for physical and emotional damage. Sarah Taylor is, at the time of writing, 29/03/2028, still in level 11's St. Bernard Hospital in the ITU ward, where she is receiving treatment for all that happened to her in the events of Log 4. X, on the other hand, recovered fairly quickly and was able to attend an interview on the events in Log 4 on 23/03/2028. See Interview 611/Omega. All documents retrieved during the expedition were handed to third-party sources skilled in translation of the language they were written in, Esperanto, and they were given to the Meg for examination on the 27th. The bodies of Team Heavy Metal members who were KIA during Log 3, as well as the remnants of the Cauldron and the Entity 611-1 instance itself, were all collected by a special collection task force sent into the level 2 days after. During this mission, no footsteps or sightings of Entity 611-1 were recorded, but 5 days after the events of Log 4, during an expedition to attempt to locate the level 420, Frozen Lake, entrance, it was reported once more that footsteps were heard in the level. It was confirmed after subsequent expeditions that Entity 611-1 instances roamed the level once more. The location and mapping of the area in which Log 4 takes place in was deemed a priority following the events of Log 4, but thus far it has not been found. Despite all the work poured into the effort, and, after careful consideration, the attempted location of the area was halted in its entirety. The reason this was done was due to the fact that nothing else could have been achieved from the discovery of that place, were it to be found, and the dangers far outweighed the possible benefits of it. Stefano Anganello and Fyodor Elinsky were both given honorary burials, which were attended by their present family members, close friends, fellow team members, including Sarah, who insisted on coming despite her condition, X, and the entirety of the Oversight Council. Families of both of these members were given reparations of approximately 10,000 BSC each, and an honorary mass was held in the name of both them and Salvu the week after their burial. The whereabouts of the enveloped one are, to this day, still unknown. Entity 611-1 Autopsy and Incident 611/11. Date 22/03/2028. Purpose: the autopsy of the recovered Entity 611-1 instance cadaver in hopes of gaining a better understanding of how the entities function. Preface: part of the entity's front had already been destroyed by the fire salt bullet. However, most of the entity's armor had still remained intact, rendering most of its body protected from the blast. Items which the entity had on its person at the time of passing are not included in this report, but an analysis of them has been included further onwards in the document. Equipment and personnel. Footnote: the names or aliases of all the personnel who took part in the operation have been kept anonymous. End footnote. One Meg agent who worked as a surgeon prior to entering the Backrooms. One Meg agent with the sufficient knowledge to perform analysis of a diverse range of chemical substances, not present in the operating room itself. 2 assistant personnel which aided the surgeon during the process. 1 Meg agent who documented the process. 2 BNTG agents who stood guard on the inside and outside of the door to prevent unwanted entrances and possible accidents. 1 scalpel. 1 carving knife. 1 pair of medical pliers. 1 light microscope. 3 sets of standard surgical attire. Operation: the corpse was brought into Base Beta inside of Level 11, the city that never sleeps, where it was placed inside the base's laboratory prior to the operation itself. The surgeon began by pulling off its helmet, shackles, and gauntlets, using the plier where necessary. Afterwards, using the carving knife, a tool specifically requested by the surgeon due to the entity's strong and thick flesh, the surgeon began carving the mangled flesh off, exposing what seemed to be its vital organs, the majority of which still seemed to be intact despite the blow, which would have ruptured them entirely were they a normal human. Of note is the absence of the following organs and body parts which humans normally possess: the lungs, the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder, the sphincters, the appendix, the bladder. Footnote: interestingly, the kidneys, or rather what was left of them, considering they had been one of the few organs obliterated in the blast, were still present in the body, despite the apparent lack of a bladder. End footnote. Quote-unquote, traditional reproductive organs, see below. The heart, a grossly overgrown, pastel-pink lump of flesh that only slightly resembled the normal human heart, was separated with 2 precise scalpel cuts near the septum. The most startling discovery made from this dissection was the total lack of the aorta, or venal cavity, and the pulmonary blood vessels, all of which are vital to the intake and output of blood which the heart pumps, which, coupled with the observation that the heart's walls were unnaturally thin in both the ventricles and the atriums, the total lack of the biscupid, triscupid, and semilunar valves, and its larger overall total surface area, has led researchers to conclude that the heart pumped blood in and out of itself via diffusion. Due to the aforementioned absence of lungs, it is unknown how or why exactly respiration occurred when the instance was alive, as no oxygen could have been introduced into the bloodstream, and no carbon dioxide could have been removed. The digestive tract was noted to be, for the most part, unaltered, save for the missing organs described earlier in this autopsy. As expected, the esophagus, the stomach, both intestines, and the rectum were all identical to those of humans, albeit slightly larger, and possessing a murky brown coloration. Despite the lack of organs like the pancreas and the gallbladder, testing with sampled sections of the digestive tract showed that enzymes and other substances excreted by these organs, such as pancreatic amylase and bile, were still present in the duodenum, which baffled researchers performing the autopsy. The only other major difference that could have affected the digestive system was found in the stomach, in that, instead of hydrochloric acid, HCl, being present in the stomach, there was the presence of nitric acid, HNO3, an acid that is far more corrosive and dangerous than hydrochloric acid. Subsequently, the mucus that normally lines the digestive system was instead replaced by a substance that could seemingly withstand its corrosiveness, later on analyzed and determined to be a nickel-based alloy. The exact purpose of this change, as well as all the other changes that were noted in the stomach, and, to an extent, the whole reason as to why the digestive system still exists in the first place, despite all these absences and the apparent lack for it, is unknown, as there are no records of Entity 611-1 needing to consume any foods normally indigestible by regular hydrochloric acid. The head, now exposed after the helmet was pulled off, was first examined outwardly. The eyes were the only organ that was not intact upon recovery, being reduced to a messy pulp that was barely identifiable. The rest of the face was intact, however, so it was duly examined by the surgeon. The oral section was, to the researchers' astonishment, more reminiscent of a carnivorous animal than that of a human, with the presence of carnassial teeth near the back end and a not-so-notable protrusion of the mouth being observed as well. Segments of the olfactory epithelium in the nasal cavity were cut out and sent for analysis, which showed that there were a staggering 500 million sensory receptors inside of it. For comparison, this is 5 times the amount of receptors which an average dog would have, which confirmed the speculation that Entity 611-1 has a heightened sense of smell. The extent of this sense is still unknown, as there has been no organism with a range similar to that which Entity 611-1 is presumed to have. The ears, which were a great source of interest to all personnel present, were more akin to those of equine breeds than to those of humans. Located near the top of the sides of the head, instead of their usual location, they were considerably larger than normal horse ears, and had a total of 13 muscles. For comparison, a normal horse has 10 muscles, which allow for 180-degree rotation of the ears, which most likely aided in the location of sounds from distant areas in the level, offering merit to the theory that Entity 611-1 instances were able to detect living beings based on auditory senses. The oral areas seemed to be standard at first. However, upon the splitting open of the cervical area, personnel present found that a traditional voice box was entirely missing from the entity's throat. This was concerning, mainly due to the fact that Entity 611-1 instances have been known to possess rudimentary speech capabilities. See Log 3 and Interview Log 611/Omega. Once surface-level examination was conducted, researchers split open the instance's head via a clean cut at the head in order to examine the entity's brain. It was interestingly noted that when the cut was administered, the head seemed much softer than the rest of the body. This observation offered an explanation as to why it was so easy to dispatch the Entity 611-1 instance in Log 4, but Salvu was unable to kill the instance during his encounter in Log 2. The physical structure of the brain was entirely identical to that of a human. However, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for managing emotions, memories, decisions, etc., hereafter referred to as the PFC, was the subject of an odd change. A black, translucent membrane had formed over the PFC, and parts of it had turned entirely tar black. The surgeon attempted to cut it, but the substance had, to his surprise, solidified in such a way that not even the carving knife was able to cut through it. Attempts to cut around it showed that the membrane had not simply formed on the outside, but on the inside of the brain as well. Listed as a slight oddity at first, the observation became all the more concerning once it was found that other areas of the brain, such as the cerebellum and parts of the cerebrum, were also covered in a thin layer of the substance. The mystery was only further amplified when the source of the substance was found, a thin, coal-black vein which was connected to the hypothalamus. Searching for the other end showed that the surgeon had missed another, entirely new organ inside of the entity, dubbed the malhinkoro, pronounced mal-hin-kor-o. The malhinkoro was a tennis ball-sized, egg-shaped sac, located near the small of the entity's back. Preliminary observation showed that the organ was comprised of just a thin membrane and the vein, the former of which was made of a translucent substance similar to human skin. The substance around the brain was contained within the membrane, and despite the fact that the entity was dead, it pulsed inwards and outwards continuously, in an irregular fashion. The surgeon attempted a cut on the malhinkoro, which split it open, spilling the contents onto the rest of the entity's open body. A similarity was noted between it and the substance observed during Log 4. However, the means by which it exited the mouths of Entity 611-1 instances remains elusive, if that is the case. Contact with the substance was discouraged at the time, but the warning did not stop one of the assistants from accidentally making contact with the substance, presumably to an open cut in their glove. See below for an explanation. An action which would prove fatal later on. The surgeon carefully took some samples of the substance in a small vial and placed them in a container for later examination. A small amount of prodding around was conducted on the cadaver, but nothing else of note was discovered, save for the obvious increase in size of the entity's muscles and its increased height. As such, the experiment was deemed concluded, and the body was frozen inside a meat locker in an abandoned butcher building, which was later sealed to prevent wanderers from coming across it. All of the staff disassembled from the room, and the samples collected were tested, which brought to light the finer details mentioned in this autopsy. Incident 611/11. During a later examination of the black substance found in the malhinkoro, a disturbing find was made. It was discovered that when clumps of the substance, footnote, the make of which was identified as being mainly carbon, with possible traces of undocumented subatomic particles undetectable by the microscopes in the Meg's possession, and footnote, made contact with human body cells, they began to alter them in a concerning manner. The cells would expand greatly in size, splitting their nuclei into two, and forming a vacuole-like organelle which holds some of the substance within it. These cells, in turn, would begin converting the cells around them, which eventually leads to a total takeover of the normal body's functions. Startled by the revelation, the surgeon requested he be given access to a number of bodily tissues, and possibly live subjects, to test the hypothesis on. Whilst the latter request was denied, the former one was heeded, and he was given a pig corpse from a local Meg-managed farm. With each experiment he conducted, the results were the same, a total takeover of the area experimented on in around 1.5 hours. The discovery terrified researchers, but they had found solace in the knowledge that in conventional scenarios they would never have to encounter the substance. Thus, experimentation on Entity 611-1 was deemed complete, and a draft of this document was written up. As one will have inferred through a reading of this document, however, there was just one issue with this conclusion. One of the accompanying assistants, June Quinton, had accidentally let a small amount of the substance make contact with their skin. As the researchers compile their post-dissection reports, June goes to his apartment in the outskirts of the currently inhabited parts of Level 11, but returns to Base Beta hours later to complain of a general discomfort being felt all over their body. He is immediately rushed into Base Beta's infirmary, where he is administered painkillers. His condition does not seem to get better. On the contrary, it seems to aggravate over time. June's skin is noted to be generally browner than usual in some areas, but this change is written off as a bad sunburn or a discoloration of the skin due to the fact that the 3 nurses that were taking care of the infirmary at the time were unaware of anything to do with Entity 611-1 and the effects of the Malhin Koro. Eventually, the dull pain turns into what was described as, quote-unquote, stabbing knives, and, quote, literal fire spreading across my body, unquote, sick. Puzzling the nurses greatly, morphine shots are administered into June's muscles, and he faints not long after. The nurses leave him on a bed at the far end of the nursery, covered by curtains. They continue about with their day, tending to the rest of their patients, and eventually exit the room for their break, leaving a comatose June alone in the infirmary. By the time they return, night has set in level 11, and they prepare themselves for their nocturnal shift. When they enter the infirmary, they go straight into June's bed to perform a checkup on his condition. They pull the curtains of his bed back, and are mortified to find that he has become grossly disproportionate and monstrous compared to his previous form, albeit still in a comatose state. One of the nurses screams, which causes June to jolt up from his slumber. Upon seeing them, he gets up from his bed and begins stumbling slowly towards them, taking short and uneasy steps. 2 of the 3 nurses run out of the room, but one stands in front of the entity in shock, unable to move. June, now transformed into a creature faintly reminiscent to Entity 611-1, grabs the nurse from her neck, choking her in the process. She kicks and squirms as she tries to escape his grasp, but she eventually succumbs, passing out from asphyxiation. June keeps on holding her from the neck, until at one point, presumably when she had passed away, he simply throws her to the other side of the room, with enough force to crack the infirmary's drywall. CCTV footage shows June beginning to make his way outside of the infirmary, moving shakily as if he has forgotten how to walk. He turns a corner and encounters an unassuming wanderer, who jumps in fear when he sees June. June grabs the man and raises them up to his head, breathing heavily, before punching the now screaming man in the face so hard that the sheer force of the punch sends him several meters down the hall. The man, now laying flat on the ground, attempts to drag himself away from the scene. June notices this, and leisurely walks up to the man with a newfound certainty in his pace. When he arrives next to him, he raises one of his gigantic feet and stomps the man's head, spilling blood all over the hallway's floor. Apathetic to what he had just done, June walks up to a stairwell that leads to some of the higher floors of Base Beta. An intercom was heard echoing in the background as this happened, notifying Meg agents that an active threat was present in the building. June stops for a moment when the message ends, presumably listening to faraway speech, and exits the stairwell into an office-filled hallway, inside of which a handful of archivists sat compiling data regarding some recent explorations. June knocks down one of the doors with a kick and enters the room, causing all 5 archivists inside to panic. They all begin trying to hide or defend themselves, but June picks each one of them up with relative ease, killing them with a simple snap of their neck. He exits the room, moving to the one adjacent to each one he had been in, and finds 2 researchers huddled under a desk. He grabs each one of them from their hair and begins slamming their faces together with incredible force, breaking their heads apart like cantaloupes. As he did this, members of Meg Task Force Night Watch, who were alerted to what was happening by the nurses, enter the room, and they find June dismembering the archivists. As June turns to look at the guards, he gets pelted by fire salt crystals, which hit him in the chest and knock him back continuously towards a large window pane. Eventually, he gets close to the pane, and, with one last explosion, he is blasted through it, and falls an entire 23 floors. Needless to say, June does not survive the fall, even with his increased abilities. His body is collected immediately before commoners in level 11 could see it, and it was promptly re-examined by the surgeon of his own volition. Similarities in muscular structure and height to Entity 611-1 were noted, but examination of the insides showed very little change from his original body, save for a few of the organs which the Entity 611-1 instance lacked being present in a corroded/damaged state. The body of June was cut and burnt following examination. Aftermath. The events of the logs, autopsy, and the incident have made one fact uncomfortably evident. Entity 611-1's reproductive process is dependent on humans. The connotations of this are, for now, unknown, but are presumed to spell bad news for people trapped inside the location in which Log 4 takes place, referred to hereafter as the slaughterhouse. It was noted that despite total assimilation of the body and its functions, June's body had only partially transformed into that of Entity 611-1. Given the context of the, at the time, newly translated speech of the enveloped one, as well as the fact that the autopsy showed that not much changes had taken place in June's overall locomotive abilities and his vitals, it is believed that for Entity 611-1 to reproduce fully, and for the new instance to gain all the strength of typical instances, human intervention is required in addition to the assimilative effect produced by the Malhinkoro. Word of how both June and the other 9 personnel killed in this incident died was kept as discreet as possible. The cover-up story of an unknown entity attack was circulated in Wanderer circles, and the bodies of the victims in the incident were given a proper burial. Following the events of this document, all experimentation on Entity 611-1 instances is banned without explicit and unanimous overseer consent. Recovered armor and weapons analysis. Date 23/03/2028. Purpose: an investigation into the durability and craftsmanship of Entity 611-1's armor. Preface: considering the magnitude of the blast endured by Entity 611-1, interest in the armor and weapons which it bore was accentuated greatly, with many wishing to learn more of how it achieved such durability. As such, permission was given to Underseer Gavin Mason, who was a professional armorer in level 452, no data currently available, before becoming part of the Oversight Council in 2023, to examine the armor, equipment, and personnel. Armorer and Underseer Gavin Mason, 1 assistant personnel who aided Gavin during the examination, a disc cutter, a magnet, large tub of water, the armor itself, a helmet of unknown make, a cervier, a pair of gauntlets, 2 leather gloves, a pair of sabatons, a pair of leather boots, and a filthy rag, formerly wrapped around its chest area. All of the metallic parts of the armor were shiny and white in color. The weapon, a chain knife covered in old blood, weighing approximately 80 kilograms. The metal was bluish-white and shiny in color. Experimentation. The armor was first spread across a table and examined for its structure and craftsmanship. Comparisons with other types of armor were made in hopes of discerning its style or origin, but ultimately, it was decided that the armor's make was far too different from other styles to draw an accurate comparison. In terms of craftsmanship and condition, Gavin was surprised to find that the entity's armor was superb in quality. Very little damage was dealt to the armor despite the grievous blow it had endured, and no overly detrimental faults in the armor's structure were noticed. This revelation was confusing, since the effort and skill displayed in these bits of armor would have gone to waste in combat, considering vital parts of the body, torso, arms, etc., were exposed in their entirety. The metallic pieces were then put away, and the gloves, boots, and rag were examined, and they were said to be made of a form of leather. No abnormal or anomalous properties were noted in any of these, save for them being coarser and more parched than usual. Pieces were cut out of each of them, and a few droplets of water were spilled onto them. Total absorption was observed within 2 seconds, confirming the material to be genuine, non-synthetic leather. The organism it was harvested from is unknown, but is presumed to be a domesticated cattle. The main event of the experimentation was up next, the in-depth examination of the remaining armor and the weapon. Firstly, Gavin used the magnet to test whether or not the metal was magnetic. Both the armor and the weapon were pragmatic, showing little to no signs of magnetism. Afterwards, small strips of the metals were cut out from the main armor pieces, and their conductivity was tested by placing them in a circuit. All of the strips which were cut showed themselves to be non-conductive, save for one cut from the chain knife. By this point, Gavin had hypothesized that the metal used in the armors was titanium. To test this hypothesis, the strips of the armor's metal were each sliced using the disc cutter, producing blindingly white sparks near the points of incision. This was enough to convince Gavin that the metal was indeed some form of titanium, possibly an alloy, which partially explained how it managed to survive the blast. This still did not answer the question of what material the knife was made of, so the full focus of the experiment was now directed towards it. The weapon seemed to be made with making killing as efficient as possible in mind. Its blade was designed to be aerodynamically streamlined in such a way that the maximum amount of momentum could be kept should it be thrown. The blade was also anything but dull, cut and sharpened in specific areas to resemble a saw more than a knife. 3 holes were punched into it, similar in fashion to a meat cleaver, presumably to give the wielder a better grip on the weapon should they need to cut something with it. These features further make the weapon more intimidating when one realizes that the blade on its own weighed a full 80 kilograms, which renders it unusable by normal humans, but all the more deadly in the hands of an entity such as Entity 611. The thought at the time was that the material used in the making of the weapon, and subsequently its chains, was either zinc or cobalt. To test this, the weapon was first put inside of a large tub of water so that Gavin could find its volume using displacement to verify it. Once that was done, the weight was taken, and it was determined to be 80 kilograms, as has been mentioned earlier on in this analysis. The density was then calculated, and it was determined to be around 22,560 kilograms per cubic meter, identical to that of the hyperdense rare metal osmium. Where exactly this metal was obtained from in the Backrooms is unknown, as there are no records of deposits plentiful enough to make anything out of it existing anywhere. As such, the means by which the metal was obtained is simply added to the list of mysteries related to Level 611, which baffle archivists to this day. Aftermath. Not much else needs to be said in regards to this experimentation that has not already been said in the documentation above. The armor's distribution on the body is sparse, but strong and powerful where it is present, and the weapon truly is a dreadful one to encounter in the hands of its wielder. It is not hard to see how the aforementioned parts of Entity 611-1 managed to survive the fire salt explosion mostly intact. But it is still unknown why only these parts are armored. As Gavin initially put it near the end of the first draft of this documentation, quote, "The reason remains elusive to me at the time, and quite frankly, I do not believe it to be concerning. We have found the beast's Achilles heel. Let us take advantage of it, instead of questioning why it is the case." End quote. Perhaps the only truly concerning factor of this entire analysis is the gathering of the resources required to create the armor. The gathering of titanium is still within the realm of plausibility, but that of osmium in particular is mystifying, to say the least. Osmium is known to be a rare metal in the front rooms, and that stands true in the back rooms as well. Theories as to whether the metal is sourced externally, i.e. from another level/entity, or if a means to produce it within the confines of the level has been achieved have been brought up, but they all lack credibility and are all therefore classified as mere possibilities. Currently, the armor and weapons are stored in the MEG's Underground Abnormal Equipment Storage Unit, UAESU, in base beta, observable only by members with the clearance to view things related to Project E611X. Interview 611/Omega. Date 25/03/2028. Interviewer Underseer Thomas Verne. Interviewee X. Preface. 12 days after the events of Log 4, X, who had now recovered partially from her time inside the slaughterhouse, volunteered to give an interview to the Meg regarding her time inside of Level 611. The interview was discouraged at first, due to the fact that her condition was still dire, but she insisted on going on with the interview despite it. The interview was conducted in Thomas Verne's office inside of Base Beta, with a small medical team assigned outside of his office in case her condition destabilized. Begin log. T. Verne. Alright, I think... Yep, the mic's rolling. Before we get too in-depth, I'd like to preface this dialogue by stating that should you wish at any point to halt this interview for any reason, you may simply request it to happen. X. Yes, I'll keep that in mind. Can I ask a question before we begin? T. Verne. Ask away. X. Are you a real doctor? T. Verne. Well, I used to be a psychologist before coming into the Backrooms, amongst other things, so yes, I am a doctor. X. Right. I just need to know if you're a professional. It's so I can ascertain myself that I'm in the right hands. T. Verne. I understand. Very well then. I suppose we can begin this interview, lest you have any more questions? X. None. I'm good for now. T. Verne. Right. First off, could you state your name for the record? X. I can, ask for me to have my name kept anonymous, right? Don't want, this thing looming above me for as long as I'm alive. T. Verne. Yes, of course. Your name will be used solely for the purposes of this conversation, and will be censored accordingly once it has been recorded. Could I ask once more for you to state your name? X. Oh, sure. My name's X. T. Vern. Very well then, X. Let us begin. To start, how did you get into this situation? X. X pauses, putting a finger to her mouth. X. I thought being out of there would help me. I guess not. T. Vern. Huh? What do you mean? X. I can't remember much of what happened before I got myself into that situation. Wait, I can cuss, right? T. Vern. You may. Though I have some friends who won't exactly be thrilled about it. X. Right. As I was saying, I can't remember much from before that place, but I can recall occasional flashes, for lack of a better term. T. Vern. Flashes? X. Yep. Memories come to me occasionally. They're brief, and they kind of hurt, but I can somewhat piece together fragments of who I was. I lived in a village. I was a farmer. I was married. I can't remember to whom, just that I was. I think I knew a whole other language at some point, but I can't remember which one. T. Vern. Forgetting a whole other language. That's concerning. What do you think caused it to happen? X. You won't believe me if I say this, but the enveloped one, they can do magic. T. Vern jots this down on their clipboard. T. Vern. Do you know what kind? X. You aren't fazed in the slightest? T. Vern. About what? X. Magic. I just told you there's magic, and you just brushed it off, like that. Is that not some big breakthrough for you? T. Vern. Not really. I've had my fair share of encounters with magic, actually, and have been having them for as long as I've worked with the Meg. X winces at the mention of the Meg, and her expression is pained. X. Yeah. I've heard of the Meg a fair bit. It's no wonder you guys have to deal with all that shit. No. I mean, one thing at a time. What did you ask me earlier? T. Vern. I asked what type of magic the enveloped one used. X. Yes. Most of what I've experienced has relied on materialistic things, like, these stick things. They used to strap me down to a chair, poking and prodding at me, and each time this white vapor would come out, latched onto those sticks. T. Vern. White vapor. You mentioned earlier in the log that you knew why you lost your memories. Do you mean X? Yes. I'm fairly certain that white stuff was my memories being sucked straight out of me. During each one of those sessions, I would forget a part of me. I'd go in knowing something, and when I came out, it was as if that concept was alien to me. I forgot, totally, and completely forgot my name at some point, too. Hell, I would have forgotten it completely if it wasn't for the others reminding me. T. Vern. That's not a really nice thought to think of. To just be able to forget your name someday and never realize it. X. Oh, it isn't. Believe me. I've had lots of time to think of just it. It's about all I could think of in the prep rooms. Like, have I experienced this before? Have I been through this hell and just forgotten it? It's thoughts like those that keep me up at night, or whatever it was when I slept in there. It's hard to keep track of time in there. T. Vern. On the topic of the prep rooms, we heard you mention them in one of our logs, and we saw some of them briefly as well. What exactly happened inside of those rooms? X. Wait, you guys have logs of me in there? T. Vern. From Sarah's perspective, yes. Your last day there was documented. Sarah had a camera with her she thought was broken, and it's besides the point. The straight and clear answer is that we do have records of that day. X. They're not public to everyone, right? People haven't just... T. Vern. No. I can assure you firsthand that all of that data is strictly confidential. X. Okay, good. I got kinda roused up there. To answer your question, those rooms were there to prepare us for some ritual. Sometimes we were simply examined. Other times we were tortured beyond reason. Actually, why even say beyond reason? It's as if torture is ever reasonable. T. Vern. What do you think the aim of the torture was? X. Oh, that's easy. You've probably heard me rant about it a bit in the video, but I'll explain once more with some new details. First off, disorientation and hope smashing. My memories, that whole white vapor thing. I'm assuming it was all to disorient me, to mix up my memories and make me feel scared, to make me feel helpless, to shatter my expectations that there was a better reality to escape to, because I didn't remember one existing. That would change how I felt about my odds, right? T. Vern. I believe so. X. But there was another reason. Manuel, the other guy who spoke Esperanto, right? He had heard the enveloped one talk to someone else, and he had heard him mention that negative reactions were a must to get those things to replace us. They harmed us in all those different ways: flogging, whippings, surgery, scalding, flaying. Also, they could make us hate being alive, so we would welcome death. T. Vern, that sounds horrible. But why would they want to do that? Wouldn't that make you guys try to evade whatever they had in store for you by, there isn't really a way I can put this X. Oh, we tried. I once tried to cut myself with a broken tile so I could die, to rid myself of this plight, and the next thing I knew, I awoke in one of the prep rooms, cut-healed. I was tortured like I'd never been before. I couldn't understand them, but they had anger in their voices, and I knew that I was being harmed for daring to defy their will. T. Vern. But what was their goal in all this? X. Making us husks, bodies filled with souls that would willingly accept death, given the chance to do so. That was what happened when they brought the demons into us. T. Vern. Like that ritual on the day you guys were saved? X nods. X. Yep. We were, on that day. It was just another part of our routine. We're all destined to become those things. We just get to see it happen in front of our eyes, so we succumb. We accept it beforehand. It's another hope-lost thing. I'd seen so much of those rituals happen that I began to fantasize about the day when it would happen to me. T. Vern. I'm assuming you guys hated the enveloped one, yes? X. It's obvious. Of course we did. We knew next to nothing about them, other than stuff Manuel told us they said. But it was enough for us to hate them with every fiber of our being. They treated us like cattle, subjects to be used up when they pleased. They wouldn't even check up on us. They'd just get their lackeys, equally useless and awful, by the way, to do so. And even then, it would just be to drop slop or escort us somewhere else. God, just thinking about their stench and the slop. How did I ever even endure that time there without puking all the time? T. Vern. God, this all sounds like a nightmare. Did your fellow captives feel the same way as you? X. In what ways? T. Vern moves their right hand in a circular fashion. T. Vern. All of what you said. All of the stuff you said you were feeling. Did they think of it like you did? X. Oh, most definitely. Down to the finest detail. Most of us had tried offering ourselves. Most of us knew our memories were being taken away from us. Most of us wanted it to be over. It's a shame to have seen some of them die the way they did. After all we'd endured, I didn't expect Juanita to give up like that, and I definitely didn't think Alex would just ditch me like that. Asshole. T. Vern. Would you say you had a close connection with them all? X. Sort of. We weren't like a family. That's a fairy tale thing that doesn't happen in our lives. We were more like unwilling companions. You've seen the footage, right? The part where I explained to Sarah why the beast called us tainted. T. Vern. I believe not, though I was meaning to ask if you knew. Was it early into your discussion? X. Most probably. I guess it depends on when you began recording. Well, since you, don't know, I'll explain. We were like unwilling companions, not just because we only had each other, or because we shared some... Is trauma the right word in this context? Whatever. It's not important to what I'm gonna say. The reason we bonded in any capacity is the same as it would be in a prison. T. Vern. Could you, elaborate on that? X. Tainted, in this context, doesn't mean tainted as in, cliché, sacrificial, virgin tainted, or whatnot. We're all tainted because we have the capacity to lose the remains of our humanity already, because some of us have already gotten close to doing so. T. Vern. Huh? X. We're all of the same creed, mister. Or at least, that's what we think. Remember that most of us can't remember jack shit. Juana remembers that she killed her husband. This girl named Jasmine threw her cat off a balcony to see what sound it'd make. Hell, I say I didn't, that Alex would never do what he did to me. But that guy's wanted for 11 murders, or at least that's what he says. The rest, I don't know. I mean, they don't know either. I'm just going by common factors and assuming that this was the reason why. I probably did something fucked up myself, which is not a happy thought. T-Vern, that's concerning. Were these things done in or outside of... No, I digress. I suppose this sort of makes you guys closer with each other. Birds of a feather. X. Close? Not these birds. We just coexisted. Knew each other by name, unless we forgot it. Knew what torture we'd endured that week. But that's it. The only ones I felt close with were Juanita, Manuel, poor guy only arrived a month ago, shame to see him go that way, and X falters, stifling back a tear. She is still and silent until T-Vern breaks the awkward silence. T-Vern, this next question may be hard on you, considering what we know from the logs, but it needs to be asked nonetheless, and I suppose now is a good time to do so. Who is she? X. She was an angel. When on the day I came into that prison for the first time, she was there. She said that just like me, she had just arrived. And when I entered, she was kind to me, treated me like a friend, like a dear friend immediately. She would tell me stories, beautiful, beautiful tales of heroism and adventure. Above all, she was something more than a friend, though I would rather not. T-Vern, it's okay. You don't have to tell us about that part if you don't want to. Did she ever tell you her name? X. It was Heather. Heather something, son. I forgot the specifics. T-Vern, who had been writing down something at this point, stops doing so. He looks up at X with a grim expression on his face. T-Vern. X. Was her last name, by any chance, Ferguson? Heather Ferguson? Does that name ring a bell? X. I think so. Why do you ask? Did you know her? T-Vern. She was one of our greatest explorers. We'd send her to different levels for thorough exploration, termination of deadly entities, and she was one of our most reliable sources of authentic documentation. One day, however, on a dreadful solo exploration, she vanished off of the face of the Backrooms. X. But you knew her, right? T-Vern. Not personally, no, but I was made aware of the details of her disappearance. It was quite a grand affair. If your story has merit, and your claim that she arrived shortly before you is true, then... X is crying gently at this point, mouth open and breathing heavily. T-Vern. X, this may have escaped your memory, but are you aware of how long you've been in there? X. No, I don't. You know, right? Just tell me how long I was in there for. T-Vern. Heather disappeared last August, 7 months ago. You were both there for 7 months. X is silent. Her hands are shaking. X. 7? I was in there for 7 months? T-Vern. It's shocking. I can't say I understand what you feel. In fact, I don't and won't claim to. X. 7 months. No. That's... No. I need to... This shouldn't... T-Vern. We can stop the interview if you want, X. You seem like you need to rest. X. Maybe I should... Perhaps... No. I'm going to do this. I need to finish this. Ask me more questions. Do it. T-Vern. Are you sure? It might be more X. I wouldn't be asking you to ask me more if I didn't mean it, God damn it. Just ask away. Get this over with. T-Vern. Yes. I'll ask. What else did you do there? X. In the room? What did you think we did? She told me stories when she remembered them. I listened. That was it. I was just happy to have company. I was ecstatic even. I had a singular solace in my bleak life, despite everything that was going on. T-Vern. You mentioned during the last log that she was taken somewhere. We've already begun connecting the dots. We know it was her who was cut open. What we wish to know is where she was relocated to before that. Do you have a clue? X. The preparation rooms. You have heard of those by this point, without the sliver of a doubt. She was taken prematurely, yet to become a husk, for she was still determined. Why did this occur? Simple. She had gotten close to calling for help. T. Vern. The camera. That explains the feeds in log 2. But how did it reach our cameras? X. I know not what the machinations consisted of, nor do I know what she had done to incite the beast's suspicion. As I have said before, my memory has been shuffled. But it was enough for them to decide she would change. T. Vern. Change. All has been speculation thus far, but the events outside of the slaughterhouse have led us to believe that this change you describe is, correct me if we are wrong, but the change you describe is that of a human into X, nodding. Indeed. I know because one thing I have not been able to forget is the gulp. Those awful transformations in that room. We would be forced to watch as muscles tore through skin, forming thick calluses and scar tissues on the outside, as faces were distorted and screams were replaced with pained whispers. Then we would watch the beast struggle for the last remnants of its humanity. And then, T. Vern. And then what? X. I need not say more. It is obvious what happens next. I have watched 11 of these transformations happen before my eyes, possibly more, which have been lost to their purges of my memory. The beast always dominates, the human recedes, and armor is donned to protect it from nothing else than freedom, a sign that it now belongs to someone, to them. T. Vern, do you happen to know anything of these beasts other than what you have said you do here and in the log? X. No, my apologies. I am quite certain I was told at some point by manual, but alas, the memory has been removed from me. T. Vern. I see. On that day, the day you were rescued, she was next in line to be changed. No? X looks down, playing with her thumbs. X. It's obvious, is it not? You saw it happen before you. She was next in line, and I was forced to watch. Such is the way of their cruelty. They show you what you are destined to be through those you love. She fought till the end, though by the time the day comes, most people lose the will to rebel against the beasts. But she kicked and punched and struggled until the very end. I believe it played a role in our escape. T. Vern. Pardon? X. You saw it, didn't you? The beast attacking its kin. T. Vern. Yes, a confusing matter, but ultimately one that was admittedly glossed over. Is there something else we ought to know about that moment? X. That beast, right? It's not just another one of those monsters. That thing wasn't armored. The enveloped one always made sure to arm its transformed victims before sending them out to do its bidding. No, that creature there was newly formed. It fought to protect us, after all, did it not? Why would it do that if it would have usually been conditioned to hunt us down? T. Vern. What are you insinuating? X. It had scars on its back. It had fucking scars on its back! Exactly in the same place she had shown me when she told me of the time she nearly died. This was no mere coincidence. No, it was... X gets up from her chair, a maniacal smile on her face. X. That thing was her. And the rest of those things may have been hims and hers and thems and everything else I've neglected to mention. Those things, they're people. They were just like us, possibly people we knew, and they were turned into monsters, to be used for whatever reason that thing wishes them to be monsters for. I could have been one of those things. I was this close. Do you understand? Do you? You can't. You won't. X cries out in pain and falls back into her chair. T. Vern gets up from his own chair and swiftly walks up to her to check on her. T. Vern. Jesus, X, are you okay? X. Yes, I'm okay. How much do we have left of this interview? T. Vern. I had one more question, but you're in no condition to answer it. X. No, ask away. I have all day. T. Vern. Are you absolutely sure? X. Yes, god fucking damn it. Just get this over with. T. Vern. X. What do you know of them? I mean, the enveloped one. X. Nothing. If I was told anything of them, it has since left my mind. If I try to piece everything together, I fail, for there is simply no explanation I can give in regards to their very existence. For all I know, they are an enigma, and they will forever remain that way. In a way, I don't want to remember. I wish to forget all of this. Crying. I did not want to be a part of this. T. Vern, you have every right to feel that way. It's the interview's over now. I'll get the doctors. They'll fix you up now, and I'll turn off the mic. X, wait, before you go, and I wish to say this so that it can be logged. Can I? T. Vern. X, please, don't hurt those monsters. They're more than just... Some of them are my friends. Don't look at them at just their surface value. I still think they can be saved. X promptly passes out, a weary smile on her face. T. Vern calls the active medical team to come into the room and turns off the microphone. End log. Aftermath. X was taken to the infirmary moments later due to her critical state, and she still is recovering in her bed at the time of writing. The interview itself was immediately reviewed, and rudimentary searches pertaining to X's origins and past were conducted to no avail. Likewise, searches of both Heather and Sarah's origins prior to their lives in the Backrooms have been made, the results of which are highly shocking. For respect of what they have both done in their time in Meg duty, said offenses have not been included in this document. Not much else can be said in regards to the interview itself that has not been documented within this file. As usual, with each new discovery relating to level 611, the content is extremely disturbing, and has prompted the Oversight Council to request that all resources available be allocated to the translation of the documents recovered from the slaughterhouse, in hopes of receiving closure to all that had happened up until now. Underseer Thomas Vern has, in accordance with X's request, asked that all experimentation regarding the killing of Entity 611-1 instances be halted for humane reasons. With a unanimous vote in the proposal's favor, killing of Entity 611-1 instances has been banned in its entirety permanently. No exceptions. Recovered texts from the slaughterhouse. Preface. The conditions which led to the following documents being received are odd, to say the least. Even in a place like level 611, a discovery of entire rooms covered in papers is highly implausible, but the occurrence is nevertheless welcome, due to the insight it has given archivists. The team behind these translations, as well as all the other required translations for this article, has been rewarded greatly with a month's worth of pay and honorary positions in the Meg's Literary Efforts group. It is to be noted that some of these texts are intertwined with each other, or come from the same source. In occurrences where this is the case, sufficient indication has been added to notify readers of this element of continuity. All documents recovered, which are purely images, have their content type field filled in with description, meaning that for the sake of continuity and simplicity, the primary means of documenting them is by word, rather than by image-based media. Images of these texts can be given on request should they be needed. The documents below are ordered in order of their relevance to investigations pertaining to level 611. Document type: Dungeon Architectural Plan. Condition: Poor. Set: Architectural plans. Content type: Description. Contents: A large top-view plan of the area in which prisoners were kept in. Despite the fact that it is torn at the middle and charred at the edges, the plan is legible enough, and apparently lists the presence of beds and lavatories. These are absent based on Log 4's footage, so it is unknown if this depicts the specific room seen in that log, or an entirely different one. Document name: Crossroads Drawing. Condition: Good. Set: Art/mosaic prototypes. Content type: Description. Contents: A point-of-view drawing of the suspended crossroads which were seen in the feeds of Log 2. Notably, the cages which were briefly seen hanging in the feed had strange creatures drawn in them, all of which were absent during the original recording. It is unknown what purpose they may have served in the grand scheme of things. Document name: Sacrificial Room Architectural Plan. Condition: Fair. Set: Architectural plans. Content type: Description. Contents: A large top-view plan of the sacrificial room. The paper is stained and yellow, but can still be read. The only labeled part of the plan is the black sinkhole, which is labeled simply as Communication. Document name: Entity 611-1 Mosaic Concept. Condition: Very poor. Set: Art/mosaic prototypes. Content type: Description. Contents: A small piece of paper cut from a larger piece. What is left of it consists of a drawing of Entity 611-1 kneeling before a larger, horned entity, similar to Entity 611-1, save for its tremendous height and its green coloration. The drawing was matched to one of the mosaics seen during Log 4, but due to the conditions which Log 4 was recorded in, i.e. the broken camera, the blurry and hectic footage, etc., not much else can be learnt of this illustration. Document name, Preparation Guideline Number 1, Condition, Fair, Set, Preparation Instructions, Content Type, Translation, Contents, a torn, ink-splattered excerpt of a text, which seemingly describes the conditions needed for one to become an instance of Entity 611-1. Text, quote, turned to mere shadows of what they once were. Only then can one incite their mightiness into this realm without risk of the husk's rebuttal. It is imperative that, unquote. Document name, Preparation Room Architectural Plan. Condition, very good. Set, Architectural Plans. Content type, Description, Contents, an elaborate drawing of what has been determined to be a preparation room, identified with X's assistance prior to the interview. A circular pedestal can be found in the center of the room, with shackles being present to hold those being tortured without a risk of rebellion. Desks, bookshelves, surgical equipment, and other elements of the room are labeled accordingly in obsessive detail. Document name, Preparation Guideline Number 2, Condition, Good, Set, Preparation Instructions, Content Type, Translation, Contents, a partially torn excerpt of a text which describes the memory removal process described in Interview 611/Omega. Certain parts of the text, indicated using bold, have been circled or underlined in the original document. Text, quote, use a sufficient prodding device, can be of any make/material, and extract memories created prior to entrance of the labyrinth. If you have been sufficiently trained, you ought to know how to discern new and old memories from each other. Do not remove newer memories. Make them believe that the dungeon has been the reality for as long, unquote. Document name, receipt, condition, very poor, set, non-applicable, content type, translation, contents, a burnt, barely legible scrap of a document detailing the purchase of what are described as quote-unquote blue ingots. The blue ingots described are generally accepted to be osmium chunks, though this cannot be verified. Attempts to search for companies within the backrooms with names similar to the one described in this document have yielded no results. Text, this purchase, unintelligible, of blue ingots were unintelligible for the sum of unintelligible units. This document hereby unintelligible and was shipped to unintelligible, courtesy of unintelligible, mining and mass unintelligible. The rest of the document is too damaged to read through. Document name, Preparation Guideline Number 3, Condition, Fair, Set, Preparation Instructions, Content Type, Translation, Contents. The paper is neatly kept and relatively clean, but it is messily cut near the bottom. The excerpt is of a text with details of an apparent engraving technique used in part of the Entity 611-1 ritual. A written memo is included at the bottom, saying, quote, refer to the diagrams I sent you, unquote. Text, quote, millimeters deep near the top of the hand. Draw figure 45. Make sure the cut runs down to the elbow, and that the depth of the cut between the hand and the forearm does not exceed more than 2 centimeters. The area of the elbow is to be laceratingly torn, unquote. Document name, Preparation Guideline Number 4, Condition, very good, set, Preparation Instructions, Content Type, Description, Contents, a slightly yellowed, but overall intact paper, inscribed on it a triangular rune with what seems to be a, thus far unidentified, symbol in its middle. A string of handwritten text at the bottom of the page reads, quote, very important, do not inscribe this incorrectly, lest you wish you and your little army to disappear all at once, unquote. Document name, Introduction to The Paragons, written by Alejandro Giorgeno. Condition, good, set. Excerpt of The Paragons, content type, translation, contents, a translated excerpt of the introduction to a book seemingly titled The Paragons. The original book's author is unknown, but the foreword's author has been identified, due to their name being written near the title of the paper, which appears to have been torn from a book, in such a way that significant parts of the text are torn out. Searches for the author of this document have not yielded any results whatsoever. Text, quote, An Introduction to the Paragons by Alejandro Giorgeno. Let it be clear that under no pretense should any of the events described in this book be replicated. The consequences are dire, regardless of whether one succeeds in doing so or not, for any of those who choose to dissent against this rule are duly, and rightfully so, brought to justice under the 1427 International Rituals and Cults Act. The sole purpose this documentation has is to inform generations to come of the past in sufficient detail to quench the occasional curious cat who may be uninformed as to what occurred in the past. In no way is any text of the book supporting the brutality and cruelty that took place during the original rise of the Paragons. If anything, the book itself is precautionary. Circumstances which may lead one to believe that the message of this book, both in and out of context, is to rouse the masses in favor of the daemons is wrong at best and utterly despicable and malicious at worst. With all that said, I, speaking as someone who has studied and lived through the atrocities committed during those times, believe that my knowledge of the subject is enough to verify that the detail in which the evils that the world can muster are described is both legitimate and informative, which can be attributed solely to the genius of the author." Unquote. Document name: unknown excerpt of the Paragons. Condition: poor. Set: excerpts of the Paragons. Content type: translation. Contents: a small strip of paper, seemingly cut from the top of the book. It is double-sided, and thus it shows two different texts of varying nature. Text 1, quote, "Iestum was similar to that of the feudal era, in that there is a workers' division which labors for a higher-ranking upper class, which, in turn, work for even higher rankings, and so on. The Trogs are the lowest in rank when compared to the rest of the system, which is believed to be due to the fact that they are the only ones born of meh." Unquote. Text 2, quote, "As has been said before, the beasts referred to as the Moulders hold power over the Trogs due to their ability to create not just the body, but the very spirit which can be used to create new sentinels. Due to the fact that they put in tiny fragments of their vast intelligence into the new spirits, it is no wonder that they are regarded so highly. If one can create the strongest soldiers in an infantry with the wag of a finger, then how could..." Unquote. Document name: unknown excerpt of the Paragons. Condition: very poor. Set: excerpts of the Paragons. Content type: translation. Contents: a single line of charred, filthy paper, underlined in what is hoped to be red ink. It reads as follows. Text, quote, "Unintelligible of them is required before unintelligible autonomous. Luckily, we unintelligible, where it had gotten close to unintelligible, not to the end of the summoning." Unquote. Document name, quote, "Letter to my friend." Unquote. Condition: very good. Set: non-applicable. Content type: translation. Contents: the paper is entirely whole and white. The ink on the handwriting is fairly recent, and the handwriting itself appears to be the same one present in the, presumably press-printed, introduction. No further commentary is given on this excerpt. Quote, "Dear Rahinj, perhaps my earlier remarks on your current situation were not received, for I have not felt the same exhilarating presence enter my mind the same way it did all those years ago, just yet. Under normal circumstances, I would have dismissed this as a symptom of my old age, but the rest of our companions have not felt it either, so I know that the blame is entirely on you. 5 years ago, I gave you my greatest creation, the Labyrinth, so that you could continue the work we had started as a team in solitude. The majority of us are old, crumbling before each other, merely artifacts in this world we live in, but we are respected for our contributions to the principal community. You are young, brimming with potential, which is why you are hidden from their gaze, unknown by the world. You are also the newest worshipper we have had the pleasure of meeting in the last 50 years. Devoted, precise, determined. You were the perfect candidate for the job. Yet, somehow, despite the resources being available to you, you have yet to bring forth results. You grow the sentinels constantly, claiming you are building an army. But what for? You have surpassed the sufficient amount of trogs required to summon a Moulder, but you have yet to bring one forth from the abyss. Do you not wish the process to be quicker? If you do, then why have we not seen the results? As far as we are concerned, you have 9 humans in captivity, 1 suitable to be a sacrifice for the sacrificial trog, and the rest are the souls that will power it. You need just one twisted child of man to come forth with a breakable mind, a feat one would think is trivial when you have nearly 300 sentinels patrolling the walls of the labyrinth. Under normal circumstances, were you anyone else, I would have long ostracized you and told you, you are not fit to work with us. And yet, because of my respect and love towards you, it is only now that I have decided to give you an ultimatum in the form of a letter to my friend. You have 7 days, an entire week for you to gather another human and finish the molder ritual. I believe the time is sufficient for your needs, and that, knowing you will be able to do it. I believe that you can. Despite my own beliefs, however, the others are impatient, and they grow ravenous for your exile. If you do not meet my terms, you will not face well in my creation for much longer. That is all I wish to tell you. Do not let this letter discourage you from finishing our work, for you have already shown the potential to usher forth the new era. All I am asking of you is to merely finish the work which you started, so that you can bask in the admiration of our peers alongside the rest of our humble community. I look forward to hearing from you, and to feel their presence once more before my last few days are over. May the moon be with you. Alejandro Giorgino. Unquote.